Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kirk Langford. Masumi was born in the Japanese town of Sado to parents Hichi and Fiko. She has two older brothers, Kenya and Rio. Masumi grew up in a loving and supportive family, did well in school, earned good grades, and was well behaved. In her 20s, Masumi visited Hawaii for the first time with her family and immediately fell in love with the island after returning home. She decided to visit again the following year. In 2007, although her parents were initially reluctant to let her travel alone due to safety concerns, they eventually realized how important the trip was to her and agreed to her plan. At the age of 21, Masumi packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and boarded a plane to Hawaii. She planned to stay for about 2 months and wanted to make the most of her time there. Her goals included improving her English and volunteering at Sunset Beach Elementary School, located nearby on the island of Oahu. During her time there, Masumi also enjoyed reading and studying history at the local library. Masumi was quite petite, and due to her astigmatism, she had to wear special glasses. She was a kind and somewhat naive girl, which could have made her an easy target for criminals. However, she did not feel any danger. Instead, she felt extremely comfortable living in Hawaii. As the weeks passed, Masumi's trip was filled with unforgettable joy. However, her vacation was coming to an end while she looked forward to reuniting with her loved ones. She also realized how much she would miss this sunny paradise and how long she would have to wait until her next visit on April 12, 2007, around 9:30 a.m. One of Masumi's friends dropped her off at the end of the road. And, as usual, Masumi decided to go for a walk. The area was not too isolated, so she felt safe. She walked along the road toward the home of her family friend, Yumi, with still half a mile to go. After 2 hours had passed without Masumi returning to house, Yumi's family began to worry. Yumi and her husband went looking for Masumi, but after searching the entire road without finding her, they felt that something was wrong. The couple called the police to report Masumi missing. The news quickly spread across the islands, and eventually, family friends notified Masumi's parents in Japan. Local residents soon organized a search effort. Masumi's small stature and limited English skills make her stand out, but they also make her more vulnerable to danger. The investigation began at the house where she was staying. Although nothing suspicious was found, experts collected DNA samples as a precaution. No clues were discovered. Her suitcase and plane ticket back to Japan were found on the table. As news of Masumi's disappearance spread, many people came to the police station with potential information about her whereabouts. A local resident provided a crucial piece of information, reporting that she had seen a young woman matching Masumi's description that morning. A man had tried to persuade her to get into a truck, but she repeatedly refused. The witness also recalled that the truck was white, which became a key detail in the investigation. Witnesses began searching the area for white trucks and checked the island's vehicle database. During this process, a second witness provided a similar account, adding that the truck had a company logo on its body. Fortunately, the man even remembered the name, Hawaii Pest Control. This information significantly narrowed the search area. Police then identified the suspect as Kirk Langford, a technician for Hawaii Pest Control. He was born in 1985 and grew up on the island of Oahu. A neighbor mentioned that the Langfords had moved to the area about 1.5 years ago and that they generally received positive reviews. They were described as friendly and religious. Kirk and his pregnant girlfriend led a quiet life. They had a young son and were expecting a second child. Kirk was known as a kind and gentle man who hosted charity Bible studies at his home, and his family regularly attended church. He was considered a trustworthy and moral person. Therefore, when rumors of his involvement in Masumi's kidnapping arose, many found it hard to believe. Kirk himself repeatedly stated that he knew nothing about Masumi's disappearance and had no involvement in the incident. However, he admitted that he was in the area the morning of her disappearance and was driving a white truck at a certain time. He claimed that this was just a coincidence and suggested that witnesses may have been mistaken. There was not enough evidence to arrest him, so the police eventually released him but left their contact information, asking him to call if he remembered anything else in the days that followed. The police discovered that Kirk owned another white truck, a Ford F-150. They examined Masumi's belongings, such as her toothbrush and a spare pair of glasses, to create a DNA profile for her. Over time, it became increasingly clear that Kirk was directly involved in the kidnapping, making it highly unlikely that Masumi had run away from home. One day, a homeless man came to the police and shared that, while he was walking, he noticed a man digging near a parked white truck. When the homeless man asked what the man was doing, he replied that he was looking for a lost necklace, which seemed suspicious. The homeless man wrote down the truck's license plate number. After an investigation, it was confirmed that the license plate number belonged to Kirk's white Ford F-150. The police had two key pieces of information. A witness saw Kirk's truck near Masumi, and another witness confirmed that Kirk was digging near his car. However, this information alone was not strong enough to obtain a search warrant. Nevertheless, because Kirk had an outstanding traffic ticket, the police were permitted to seize both vehicles for a detailed examination. They also summoned Kirk for questioning, but he refused to answer any questions without a lawyer present. He subsequently took a polygraph test, which he failed. Fortunately for him, polygraph results are not legally admissible in court. The police understood that their best chance of arresting Kirk was to obtain a positive DNA match from his truck and Masumi's belongings. Unfortunately, the processing of the DNA samples took too long, compelling the police to release him. Ultimately, the police found key evidence inside Kirk's work truck. They discovered blood and glasses on the upholstery. A few days later, tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Masumi Watanabe, and the glasses found in the truck matched hers exactly. At this point, Masumi's case shifted from being classified as a missing persons case to a murder investigation. Kirk was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During a subsequent interrogation, he changed his story, claiming that he had actually seen Masumi on the day of the incident. In this new account, he stated that he had accidentally hit her with his car, causing only minor injuries. He claimed he attempted to take her to the hospital, and she reportedly agreed. However, after driving a short distance, she suddenly jumped out of the truck. The car was traveling at over 40 miles per hour, resulting in Masumi hitting her head upon impact. Kirk attributed her strange behavior to their lack of communication. Citing her poor English as a contributing factor, he confessed that Masumi had been severely injured and died instantly after jumping from the vehicle. Instead of calling the police, he hid her body in the back of his truck that evening. Kirk cleaned out the truck and returned home to have dinner with his wife and children. He then went to a store to make a purchase. Surveillance cameras recorded him at two stores buying gloves, a shovel, chlorine-based cleaner, and trash bags. He then transferred the body from the company truck to his own vehicle and drove out into the countryside. There, a homeless man saw him digging, supposedly looking for a necklace, but in reality, he was digging a grave to bury Masumi. When Kirk was discovered by the homeless man, he panicked. Instead of burying Masumi, as he had initially planned, he threw her body into the ocean. He later explained that he lied to the police because he was afraid of losing his job. In an interview, Kirk's live-in girlfriend mentioned that, after dinner on April 12, Kirk went out to work, and when he returned home, she noticed some stains on his clothes. Interestingly, Kirk's girlfriend later recanted her statement. However, the police returned to the burial site but found no evidence. Kirk's claim that he had abandoned his plan to bury the body there turned out to be correct, and, unfortunately, Masumi's body was never found. There was sufficient evidence to convict Kirk, including the testimony of several witnesses, a DNA match linking Masumi to Kirk's belongings, and Kirk's own statements. However, Since there was no evidence of intentional conduct, it was challenging to charge him with first-degree murder. As a result, prosecutors decided to charge him with second-degree murder on March 4, 2008, nearly a year after Masumi's disappearance. The trial began. Kirk maintained that the incident was accidental, arguing that Masumi had jumped out of the moving truck on her own and that he was not responsible for her death. Kirk's parents attended the trial and insisted that their son was a good person who could never commit murder. They argued that he was the victim of a plot by the police. The prosecution believed that although Kirk had not planned the kidnapping or murder in advance, they also rejected his claim that the incident was accidental. Experts pointed out that if Kirk had actually hit Masumi with his car, his vehicle would have been damaged. However, upon examination, no such damage was found on the truck. Furthermore, the injuries the girl sustained must have been much more severe than Kirk described, making his entire testimony seem implausible. The police and Masumi's family believed that Kirk had buried her body nearby instead of throwing it into the sea. However, in court, Kirk insisted that he had thrown her body into the ocean. The police contended that if the body had indeed been thrown into the ocean, the tide would eventually wash it ashore, as they had seen in similar cases. Because Masumi's body was never found, the police could not determine the cause of her death or whether she had been abused. Masumi's parents attended the trial. At one point, Kirk told them that he had not tortured Masumi. However, her parents, like the prosecutors, did not believe him. Masumi's father stated that every night he heard Masumi's voice, calling for him to take her home. Masumi's mother expressed that the family would not find peace until they could bring their beloved daughter back to Japan and give her a proper burial. After reviewing the evidence presented in court, the jury deliberated for a day and a half. Ultimately, Kirk Langford was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. This is one of the longest sentences in Hawaiian history. Kirk's appeal was denied. It is hard to describe the depth of pain her family and friends must have felt. Losing a child is one of the hardest experiences for any parent, especially when they cannot even lay their daughter to rest. Masumi was a shy, gentle girl with her whole life ahead of her. She was drawn to the Hawaiian Islands and loved them dearly. Tragically, what was once a true paradise for Masumi became her final resting place. After the verdict, Masumi's mother made an emotional plea. She bowed humbly before the court and begged Kirk to show them where the body was buried. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Terry McAdams. The main character in today's story is Terry McAdams, a vibrant and active 22-year-old from Arlington, Texas. Since her teenage years, she enjoyed driving around the neighborhoods in her convertible. She often spent time in the city with friends, listening to music. Terry was a bright and popular cheerleader who always drew attention but remained modest and well-mannered. She deeply loved her sisters, Hopper and Pamela, and shared a close bond with all her relatives. Terry acted as a mentor for her sisters, bridging the gap between them and their mother. She enjoyed dancing with them and even taught them how to drive. Everyone who knew Terry described her as a person who loved life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the University of Arkansas. Before completing her degree, she decided to move to Arlington to be with her fiancé, Karen Anderson, who was a few years older and had already graduated. After graduation, she planned to start a career and marry Karen, who proposed to her. Since 1984, local newspapers have been reporting on the murders in the Fort Worth area. During this time, Terry was studying at university and took the threat very seriously. She was genuinely afraid for her life, a concern she shared frequently with Karen and family. To protect herself, Terry made several significant changes. She quit her well-paying job in Irving, where she had to drive every day and return home in the dark. Understanding the potential danger, she decided it wasn't worth the risk of driving at night. Despite being young and energetic, Terry began to live a very cautious lifestyle. She stopped going out at night, avoided parties, and only left her home during the day when accompanied by Karen. She even felt anxious about going grocery shopping and often called her mother multiple times a day to express her fears. Terry was genuinely worried about the situation, especially since the authorities had not yet identified the criminal, leaving the streets of Arlington feeling unsafe. Around the same time, Texas police bodies formed a task force consisting of experienced experts to look into a series of violent crimes and prevent further massacres. They believed that a serial killer, or potentially multiple terrorists, were active in the area. Terry felt particularly anxious because she fit the profile of the victims. They were all attractive, around her age, and lived nearby. It was difficult for her to cope, but Karen provided strong support. She admitted to her mother and sisters that being alone was the most frightening part. To help her feel safer, Karen decided to leave his job and accept a new high-paying position closer to home, though it occasionally required business trips to nearby cities. During her moments of panic, she limited her outings and rushed home after school. For any important tasks, she aimed to handle them early in the morning and always sought someone to accompany her. On the morning of February 13, 1985, the local police station received a disturbing call. An employee responsible for technical maintenance at the residential complex where Terry lived reported that he was unable to gain access to the apartment. When the police arrived, no one answered the door, and they were unable to reach the Terry's relatives. As a result, they decided to speak with local residents. Neighbors confirmed the repairman's account. They also could not contact Terry but reported hearing suspicious noises coming from her apartment. The police then decided to break down the door to enter her apartment. Inside, they discovered a gruesome scene. Terry's body was found in the bedroom on the bed. Terry had been raped and brutally beaten with a blunt object. Based on the condition of her body and the blood evidence, it seemed the crime took place at night or early in the morning before the police were called. Forensic experts quickly arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. It was clear that there had been a struggle and Terry had fought back. They found numerous defensive wounds on her arms and upper body, and her face was severely disfigured from a prolonged beating. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, but the forensic expert believes the attacker did not kill her that way. Instead, she died from a severe head injury. She also suffered brutal rape, but it is unclear whether this occurred before or after her murder. DNA traces were found on her bed linen and underwear, but at that time, it was not possible to identify the owner. The analysis methods were still developing and could not be used in the investigation. Additionally, there were no surveillance cameras or geolocation tracking available. The situation became more complicated when local people learned about the tragedy and needed psychological support. The robbery theory was quickly dismissed as many valuables were still intact in the apartment, including conspicuous items. It was clear that robbery was not the motive. The police began interviewing Terry's friends and relatives, looking for people who might have had personal motives such as jealousy, hatred, or revenge. However, Terry McAdams was known to be very kind, friendly, and non-confrontational, and none of her relatives could think of anyone who would want to harm her. Police searched the crime scene but did not find the murder weapon, which forensic experts believe was a hammer or a similar metal tool. They did discover a cigarette butt in the apartment, indicating it likely belonged to the killer. Unfortunately, the technology available at the time was insufficient to extract DNA from the cigarette, and the saliva remnants were too small to analyze. The only useful information obtained was the brand of cigarettes the killer used. One theory being considered is that a serial killer may be responsible for the crimes. Police have looked into Terry's murder and other cases in the nearby area and believe the suspect may not have known the victims and the attacks appear to have occurred spontaneously. The attacker aimed to avoid detection and leave no evidence behind. So he chose to enter through the back sliding balcony door instead of the main entrance. There were no clear signs of a break-in on the outer window frame. It is probable that he used a tree, growing a few meters away from the apartment building's wall, to reach the balcony. Unfortunately, aside from these basic observations, police were unable to gather any useful information. Police spoke with the family of the Terry, particularly her mother and sisters, who had the closest bond with her. They were all understandably shocked by the tragedy. Terry, known for her cheerful demeanor, seemed incapable of having enemies, especially ones who would wish to harm her so cruelly. Disturbingly, it appeared that Terry had a sense of impending danger. She was afraid to leave her home, fearing she could become a victim. Tragically, she was killed in her own apartment. As news of the attack spread throughout the city, the local community began to believe that there was a killer on the loose, capable of breaking into any apartment. They suspected that he might have targeted attractive women, stalked them, and attacked them. Ultimately, the community felt that no one was safe, especially young women who might be the next targets. Residents decided to take matters into their own hands. Over the next few months, gun and ammunition sales skyrocketed as more people began arming themselves. Meanwhile, public pressure began to mount on the police for answers. The county sheriff appeared on a local television station, asking anyone with information about the crime to come forward. After Terry's murder was reported on the local news, police received numerous calls, but the information did not help the investigation. Initially, Terry's fiancée Karen was considered the prime suspect, but he was away on business at the time and had an alibi. The police tried to include him in the murder profile to close the case and appease public concern, but this was not possible. Terry's friends could not believe that he could commit such a crime. After his alibi of being away on business was confirmed, he was removed from the suspect list. Police spoke with Terry's relatives to reconstruct a timeline of events that took place on February 12. Terry arrived at school around 4 p.m. After leaving the university, she got into her car and drove home. Once home, she changed clothes and went shopping, again alone. Although she usually liked to invite her friends along, they were all busy that day. First, she went to the nearest grocery store to buy ingredients for a cake she planned to make for Karen to celebrate Valentine's Day. He was scheduled to return from a business trip the next morning. Store employees confirmed that they saw Terry at the checkout and even provided a receipt for her purchase. The receipt confirmed that she had purchased ingredients for baking. They determined that she left the store at around 6:30 p.m. Police questioned anyone who may have seen her at the time, looking for any suspicious behavior, such as someone following her. However, no one reported anything unusual. It appeared to be a routine shopping trip. Terry paid for her items and walked out. Terry went home and decided not to go out again, as she had scheduled a visit from a repairman the next morning to fix some wiring issues. That evening, none of the neighbors were home, and those who did hear strange noises were unable to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. The sounds faded relatively quickly, leading people to calm down. Typically, police would look for the killer among the victim's close acquaintances. However, this time it wasn't the case. A few months ago, Terry was preparing for her wedding. Karen had given her a $5,000 engagement ring, but the police were unable to find the ring during their investigation. Initially, it was thought that the ring's disappearance could be a robbery gone wrong. However, further investigation revealed that this theory was unlikely, as nothing else was missing. Given its value, a campaign was launched to find the ring. Approximately 250 flyers with a picture of the ring were distributed to local pawn shops, including those in Fort Worth and Dallas, informing them of the missing jewelry. Despite this effort, no one reported the ring to the police. The police followed up on all potential leads, but none of them came to fruition. All of the suspects questioned provided alibis. The police focused on people with a history of violence who lived in the area. However, the investigation began to stall. Terry's relatives made efforts to promote the case. They regularly reached out to the public through various media channels. They appeared on TV and radio and distributed many flyers, but their efforts yielded no results. Eventually, the murder of Terry McAdams became an unsolved case that was filed in the archives. The Terry's family continued to seek justice, but the police lacked the necessary resources and evidence to advance the investigation. The case went cold for 36 years until 2021, when a team of experienced police and forensic experts was assembled to revisit forgotten cases, utilizing new technologies. Among these cases is that of Terry McAdams. Police used advanced DNA testing methods, allowing them to re-examine old evidence. Biological material from the perpetrator was found on Terry's underwear and bed sheets. She fought back during the attack, leaving traces of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails. A cigarette was taken from the archives and sent for testing because the killer's saliva might be on it. This thorough analysis helped create a profile of a likely suspect. However, when this profile was checked against the database of known offenders, there were no matches. Terry's family hoped to find the killer who had been on the run for decades. Unfortunately, despite their hopes, the case remained unsolved for many more years. Fortunately, the investigation continued and eventually decided to use a new method, genetic genealogy technology, which required the assistance of the FBI. In August 2023, after exploring all possible options, the police department reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigations in Dallas for help with the Terry McAdams case. They planned to analyze the DNA samples collected from the crime scene and the victim's body. This genetic testing aimed to create a family tree of the suspect, allowing the investigation to extend beyond the existing database, which only included known offenders. By using genealogical research, police could significantly increase the chances of identifying the suspect's relatives, particularly close ones. This method is considered very effective. At the time this study was conducted, the database had grown to the point where the probability of finding a match was close to 100%. The investigation was successful in identifying a man named Bernard Sharp, an American who had a notable history with the police in the 1980s. At the time of the crime, Bernard was 30 years old and married. He was also a neighbor of Terry, and Karen had a close relationship with him. During the investigation following the arrest, Bernard contacted the police and supported the victim's family. He provided an alibi that the police initially found suspicious, however. His wife later confirmed his alibi, leading to him being cleared of suspicion. Ultimately, all suspicions against him were cleared and the investigation continued without results. On the evening of November 3, 1985, a man called the police, claiming to be Bernard's wife's brother. He reported that he had been shot and needed assistance. After investigating, the police discovered that an armed criminal had attacked him, his sister, and her friend at their home. When the police arrived at the scene, it appeared to be a horrific massacre. He recounted that when he returned home with his sister and her friend, he found Bernard waiting for them with a gun. Bernard opened fire, killing the two women on the spot and wounding Bernard's wife's brother. Bernard's wife's brother was injured in the shooting but escaped to a neighbor's house. His injuries were not life-threatening. Bernard may not have expected his wife's brother to be there, and the shooting may have been premeditated. When Bernard realized his plan had failed, he began shooting at people. In addition to the two dead women, Bernard's wife's brother was also found wounded at the scene. Bernard was shot in the head and died from his injuries on November 3, 2008. Probably, the decision to voluntarily end his life was a factor in the tragic events that unfolded. It is now clear why the attacks on young girls in the city stopped after this tragedy. Bernard was a serial killer. During the investigation, no witnesses came forward to confirm his plans or his connection to the murders of Terry and the other girls. However, several close friends of Bernard's reported that he knew Terry's killer but did not name him. Several months after Terry's murder, Bernard was found dead after killing his wife and her friend, and seriously injuring his wife's brother. Police were unable to locate his body for an autopsy, so they had to take other measures to determine his connection to the murder of Terry McAdams. Police traveled out of state to meet with one of Bernard's registered relatives. Although the man did not want his name linked to the crime, he eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample. Forensic genealogy helped confirm Bernard's guilt. At the time of Bernard's death, police were unable to compare his DNA with the DNA found at the crime scene. They were unable to establish a connection between his previous attacks. Before killing his relatives, Bernard had only used violence and had not used a gun. Furthermore, Bernard's fingerprints were not in the police database, meaning that no matches could be found. Given the nature of the attacks, police suspect he may have been involved in other crimes in his neighborhood. He appears to fit the profile of a serial rapist and murderer. Bernard's criminal record has been turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an agency known for its crime-solving abilities. However, there has been no confirmed evidence of his involvement in any other cases. For Terry's family, identifying the killer brought them relief. After 39 years, the case was finally closed. This breakthrough was made possible by new technology. Terry's sisters appeared on a local television channel and shared their feelings about the case being solved through several interviews. After nearly 40 years, they say it would have been better to see justice in person. However, they take comfort in knowing that this dangerous criminal stopped his criminal ways long ago and cannot harm anyone again. If he had not stopped, many more innocent women could have been victimized by him over the years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nurauder family. Michelle and Lloyd Nurauder, two high school students, have a very close relationship. He was a year younger than she, but this didn't stop him from falling in love with her. They dated for 2 years and then got married. By the mid-90s, Lloyd graduated with an engineering degree and began teaching science at a university. He then worked as an engineer at a factory. Michelle pursued higher education and became an English teacher at a college. During this time, their first daughter was born, followed by 2 more daughters later on. The 90s were a period of many important changes for them. They moved to a large house in a town called Corning, near New York. They appeared happy. Lloyd works very hard but still makes time for his family, especially his 3 daughters. Michelle was positive and energetic, managing the household and caring for the children. As a teacher, she also educated their children at home. Together, they formed an ideal family, admired by many of their acquaintances. Over time, Lloyd's behavior changed significantly. He used to be a caring father and husband, but then he began to act in a patriarchal manner, manipulating his family to control them. He demanded complete obedience to the rules he set. If there is a conflict, he is willing to use force to force his wife and children to agree with his point of view. This caused the family's relationships to deteriorate. The only daughter with whom Lloyd maintains a good relationship is his second daughter, Carrie. She stood out among her siblings because of her loyalty to he. He spent time with her, took her to the ballet and other events, and even did her hair and makeup. However, he did not show such affection to the rest of the family. As Carrie grew up, she became a very thoughtful person, actively involved in many charitable organizations, and enjoyed helping the homeless. Despite some disagreements. But the Nurauder family stayed together until 2008. During this time, America faced a severe financial crisis, causing job and money problems for millions. Lloyd lost his job and had to look for a new one, but many others were in the same situation. Michelle also looked for jobs but couldn't find any. She had been managing household duties and caring for their daughters. Lloyd eventually found a decent job in New Jersey. Michelle was relieved that he found employment. He moved to New Jersey alone, while Michelle took a part-time job in their hometown, Corning, juggling it with childcare and housework. It was challenging for her, as she was supporting the family on her own. A few months later, things took a strange turn, when Lloyd suddenly demanded a divorce from Michelle. This decision was unexpected because there had been no serious signs of trouble in their marriage. Even their friends hadn't noticed any quarrels between them. Lloyd's decision was a complete shock to Michelle and children, leaving her feeling lost. She had been an excellent mother and wife, but her husband put her in a difficult position. He claimed that during their time apart, he has no more feelings and no longer wanted to be with her. Worse still, before proposing the divorce, he had that she cut off all ties with her family and friends. This further upset Michelle, as she felt isolated and lacking support. Despite experiencing a nervous breakdown, she managed to pull herself together. She found a job as an English teacher at a college and became a single mother. Several years after the divorce, Michelle and her children moved to another house in the same city. Her daughters had grown up, which made her life easier. The girls can help with housework and take care of themselves. This allowed Michelle to focus more on her work. She has built a successful career and made a lot of money. Even so, Lloyd, a manipulative person, still makes things difficult when fights over child support and arguing about alimony. The divorce process lasted about 5 years, during which Lloyd repeatedly attempted to discredit Michelle to gain custody. Despite this, Michelle fought back, she defending herself in court and made a rebuttal against Lloyd. Lloyd was a skilled manipulator, and after 2010, the middle daughter, Carrie, moved in with him. Little girl believed it was her own decision because she loved and missed her father. The other children did not agree with her choice and urged her to stay with their mother, Michelle. In court, the judge supported the decision of the other children to remain with Michelle. On August 28, 2017, a family friend arrived at Michelle's house to pick up her youngest daughter for swimming practice. As he got out of the car and approached the house, he noticed Michelle in an unusual position by the stairs, visible through the living room window. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, and Michelle didn't move. The dog was barking continuously, which made him feel uneasy. He found the door was unlocked. So he went inside to check. As he got closer, he realized that Michelle was not standing but was hanging from the railing. He checked her pulse, but her hand was cold and numb. He immediately called 911, reports that Michelle appears to have ended his life. When emergency services arrived, they confirmed that 46-year-old Michelle had been dead for some time and beyond repair. The police searched the house but found no one else present, even though Michelle lived there with her 14-year-old daughter. Carrie lived with Lloyd, and the eldest daughter was away at college. At first, it seemed like Michelle had committed end his life. However, as the police investigated, they found more inconsistencies in the case. There were marks on Michelle's face, suggesting the incident may have been staged. It was also strange that the youngest daughter was nowhere to be seen, even though she was supposed to be home. This led the police to consider both murder and the possible kidnapping of the child. Detectives contacted Carrie and Lloyd. They first reached Carrie, and the little girl said that her youngest sister was there. This interested the police, as the younger daughter never missed training and did not want to go to her father's house, Lloyd. Michelle hadn't allowed her to miss school the day before, so why did she go there? The police then confirmed this with Carrie. Carrie explained she had stayed overnight at Michelle's. Carrie and her sister left Michelle's home long before a family friend discovered Michelle. According to little girl, Michelle had been unstable and hysterical during the day, so Carrie didn't want to leave her younger sister with her mother and took her with her. The story seemed implausible because Michelle's body was cold when discovered, indicating she had died long before. This contradicted Carrie's statement that they left shortly before a family friend found Michelle's. Contacting Michelle's acquaintances and friends also made Carrie's story more suspicious, as they provided a different perspective to the police. A friend mentioned that 2 days before her death, Michelle attended a court hearing about custody issues for her youngest daughter. Lloyd was actively fighting for custody, but he was unexpectedly absent from the last meeting and did not answer calls, which was very unlike him. Michelle was very happy because she would win custody of her youngest daughter. She even celebrated with her lawyer, confident she would be granted full custody due to Lloyd's absence. Therefore, she had no reason to be anxious or depressed, as the custody issue had been resolved in her favor. Michelle's mother, Jeannie, upon learning about the tragedy, immediately informed the police that she suspected Lloyd of being responsible for her death. She could not believe that Michelle would choose to end her own life and leave her children behind. Consequently, Lloyd became the prime suspect, because for years, he tried to take away Michelle's custody, and their divorce had been contentious. It was initially difficult to reach Lloyd. According to Carrie, he was with her at the time of the murder, help her settle into her new home before going to university. Lloyd spent the night at a hotel in Rochester, which is about 160 kilometers from Cortland, and then flew to California for a job interview, placing him 4,000 kilometers away. When investigators contacted Lloyd and informed him of Michelle's death, he showed no emotion. After the trial, Lloyd went to the police station and confirmed Carrie's claim that during the time of Michelle's death, he was in another city helping Carrie move. According to Lloyd, Carrie came to see him at the hotel to see how he was getting along. He then took little girl to the parking lot, and she left, and he returned to his room. He provided the hotel reservation as evidence. Although he agreed to take a polygraph test, he never did. Detectives couldn't file charges due to insufficient evidence, but they were suspicious The police began reviewing CCTV footage and phone records to track the movements of Lloyd and Carrie in the days leading up to Michelle's death. They found inconsistencies between the footage and the location of Lloyd's phone, suggesting he was deliberately leaving his phone behind to hide his movements. It became clear he was not truthful. Carrie was indeed with he at a Rochester hotel, but in the evening, they went to the parking lot, and he did not return to the room as he claimed. They went somewhere on the night of the murder and only returned at 7 a.m. the next day. Investigators found that Lloyd was in financial trouble. He has to bear large debts. He owed $100,000 on one credit card and was in desperate need of money. However, after the death of Michelle, he received over $200,000 from her life insurance, which was beneficial for him. This made investigators more suspicious of him, and they to scrutinize him more closely. When checking the location data from Carrie and Lloyd's cell phones, investigators found out that it seemed like Carrie was involved too. The decision was made to monitor the conversations between Carrie and Lloyd. Wiretaps of their phone calls revealed they were indeed hiding something. They avoided many topics during their discussions, and Lloyd often abruptly ended Carrie's questions, as if aware they were being monitored. Some conversations were deferred to face-to-face meetings. Lloyd repeatedly stressed the importance of keeping quiet during their calls, indicating they had secrets to conceal. The detectives were certain they were on the right track and expected Carrie and Lloyd to confess, but it didn't happen. So, the police decided to accelerate the investigation by speaking to Carrie directly. They invited her for questioning. However, she did not go to the police station, making various excuses. Through wiretapping, the police discovered that Lloyd was pressuring her to delay and forbade her from going to the station to avoid exposure. Meanwhile, a forensic expert performed an autopsy on Michelle and confirmed clear signs of murder. He found bruises around her eyes and marks on her chin. It appeared she was attacked from behind and strangled. The attacker held her by the throat, making it difficult for her to resist. It was evident that she hadn't committed to end his life, and the situation was clearly a setup. This forced them to contact Carrie again. However, she continued not to go to the police station. The detectives didn't want to hear her excuses anymore, so they met her right after school. She was caught off guard and confused at the police station. Initially, she denied everything. She admitted to being with Lloyd at Michelle's house that morning, but claimed she didn't know what happened there. Her parents started arguing, then they went upstairs and continued arguing. Under pressure from the detectives, Carrie revealed an even more terrifying than Lloyd's. Carrie confessed that Lloyd really killed Michelle, and she was there to ensure her sister didn't witness the crime. She was actually an accomplice to the murder. A week before the incident, she and Lloyd planned to make it look like Michelle had ended her life. The police listened to the candid confession of she. She admitted to hating her mother but couldn't explain why. She idolized her father, Lloyd. This is typical behavior of a manipulated person. Under Lloyd's influence, Carrie's hatred for Michelle grew, he manipulating her until the end. This manipulation led her to become an accomplice, agreeing to help him, covering for him, and help prove his alibi. The police arrested Carrie. Then, they went to Lloyd's house, but he wasn't there. Investigators tracked him down in Princeton using his phone. When officers arrived at the parking lot where he was located, Lloyd saw them and climbed onto a railing, threatening to jump from the 5th floor. After 2 hours of negotiations, the police were able to reach him, and he was arrested. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. He was shocked by the arrest and denied all charges. He claimed he was at a hotel during the crime. Phone records supported his alibi, and he had a room reservation at the time. However, CCTV footage showed him leaving the hotel with Carrie at night and returning during the day. GPS data placed him near Michelle's house at the time of the murder, and Michelle's pajamas had his DNA. This evidence dismantled his alibi. 19-year-old Carrie was charged with second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and concealment of evidence. She faced a potential life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. To avoid the maximum penalty, she admitted her guilt and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She was required to testify against her own father at the trial. During the trial, the prosecutor highlighted a troubling aspect of the case: Carrie was directly involved in the crime. She was present in Michelle's house and assisted Lloyd. Despite having multiple chances to stop the crime, she chose not to intervene and instead helped her father murder her mother. According to the evidence, Carrie and Lloyd arrived at Michelle's house early in the morning. She trusted them and opened the front door, unaware of the impending betrayal by they. Lloyd attacked Michelle and strangled her with a rope. While this happened, Carrie ensured that her younger sister remained asleep and did not witness the crime. After the murder, they left through the back door, preventing the younger sister from realizing what had occurred inside the house. The evidence collected by the detectives included nearly 26 files. Most pointed out that Lloyd had been turning Carrie against her mother, Michelle, for years. He consistently insulted Michelle and portrayed her negatively. Once Carrie moved in with him, he began to restrict her communication. His goal was to kill Michelle and other children. Consequently, she unintentionally developed hatred toward Michelle. The prosecution claimed that the motive for the murder was to claim life insurance money and avoid sharing custody of his youngest daughter. Lloyd believed that making Michelle's death look like she had ended her own life would allow them to live comfortably with the money. In court, Carrie testified that Lloyd gave her a harsh ultimatum: either they kill her mother, or he might end his own life. He complained about his difficult financial situation because he had to pay $6,000 in alimony every month, stating he couldn't continue living this way. Faced with this, Kerry made a dire choice and agreed to help in the crime against Michelle. The prosecutor acknowledged that Lloyd manipulated Kerry and advocated for lenient punishment for her. Ultimately, he admitted his guilt in the murder. As a result, Lloyd was found guilty of first-degree murder and other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently held at Clinton Correctional Facility in New York. During the trial, Kerry's maternal grandmother, Jeannie, requested a lighter sentence for Kerry and a harsher sentence for Lloyd, who had tormented Michelle throughout their 25-year marriage and ultimately killed her. Jeannie expressed that she did not believe Michelle would have wanted a severe prison sentence for Kerry, but rather for little girl to lead a happy life. Kerry was found guilty of concealing evidence. The judge considered Jeannie's plea and the prosecutor's perspective, resulting in the lightest possible sentence of 1 to 3 years in prison. Kerry was released early on January 16, 2020. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Michelle Hearnden. Michelle Hearnden was born in 1981 in a small Florida town with a population of just 7,000. After finishing school, she enrolled at the University of Florida in Gainesville in 1999. Michelle joined the Peace Corps as a volunteer, assisting both people and animals. Michelle suffered from chronic, debilitating migraines. These attacks caused her to experience severe pain on a daily basis, accompanied by symptoms such as nausea and extreme sensitivity to light, smell, and sound. Despite trying medications, herbal teas, and numerous visits to the doctor, nothing helped ease her pain. In 2005, a new school year began. Michelle returned to university to continue her studies. To cover her tuition and rent, she worked at a fitness center. With limited funds, she rented a small apartment far from campus. At that time, Michelle was in a complicated long-distance relationship with a guy named Jason. Her best friend, Jessica, whom she met at university, lived on campus. They worked together, talked frequently, and often visited each other. Jessica's roommate was Oliver O'Quinn, a 27-year-old student from Georgia. Oliver was a great roommate and a friend to both Jessica and Michelle. The three have often spent time together. Michelle shared her relationship problems with Jason, and Jessica was always supportive. Oliver offered advice from a male perspective. Being a bit older and more experienced, they often valued his wisdom. Oliver, a nurse in the hospital's surgical department, began helping Michelle manage her debilitating migraines after learning about them. The hospital provided strong medications that greatly relieved her pain, allowing Michelle to finally enjoy life without those severe headaches. Surprisingly, Oliver had previously served in the Air Force and worked in Africa. Michelle dreamed of moving to Africa to help animals. She and Oliver could talk endlessly about it. Michelle decided to take a break from her long-distance relationship with her boyfriend, Jason. During this time, she met Scott, a funny musician who played guitar in a band. Michelle felt very comfortable with Scott. However, in mid-October 2005, Jason returned and pleaded with Michelle to reconcile, and she agreed. She began making plans to spend Thanksgiving together. Meanwhile, Oliver was not impressed with any of Michelle's boyfriends, considering them frivolous and unreliable. The reason was that Oliver was in love with Michelle. Many acquaintances had suspected this for a while, noting the way he interacted with her and the way he looked at her. Oliver was constantly involved in her relationships and even accompanied her on dates, which seemed awkward, but Michelle didn't mind. She believed that they were just friends and didn't see anything wrong with that. At the end of October 2005, Michelle met with Jessica to share some exciting news. She and Jason had decided that she would move in with him, 500 kilometers away. Jessica was thrilled for Michelle, congratulated her, and asked about Oliver, but Michelle didn't respond. Michelle began getting ready for the move, balancing her busy schedule of studies, work, volunteer activities, and now packing and buying household essentials. Despite the hectic pace, she enjoyed these tasks. As a result, Michelle and Jessica saw each other less frequently, usually only catching up during their weekend volunteer work. They planned to have dinner together on November 9, 2005, looking forward to catching up and sharing stories. However, Michelle didn't show up for the meeting that evening, which was uncharacteristic of her. Jessica tried to call her friend, but she didn't answer. She assumed Michelle was upset about something and believed that was why she didn't show up. Jessica left several messages asking Michelle to explain what happened and why she was upset, but Michelle never responded. Jessica decided not to wait any longer and went home. When she got home, her phone was dead, so she charged it and went to bed. The next morning, on November 10th, Jessica discovered many voice messages on her phone. One was from the fitness center where both girls worked. The administrator asked about Michelle's absence, as she had not been at work for a couple of days. Their shifts didn't overlap, so they didn't see each other at work, leaving Jessica unaware of Michelle's absences. Understanding the significance of this project to Michelle, Jessica became anxious. She worried that something might have happened to Michelle. Jessica tried calling Michelle again, but there was no response. She then reached out to all her friends, but none of them knew where Michelle was. Concerned, Jessica got into her car and headed to Michelle's house to check on her. Meanwhile, after learning about her daughter's disappearance, Michelle's mother also drove to another city to find her. The drive took about an hour. When Jessica, who arrived first at Michelle's residence, got there, she saw police officers had sealed off the area as a crime scene. It was then that she received the heartbreaking news: Michelle had died. Nearby, she noticed a distressed Jason. Michelle's mother later arrived at the house and made the horrifying discovery that her daughter was dead. There was no sign of forced entry into the apartment. All the doors and windows were closed, the lights were off, but the TV was on very loudly. Nothing had been stolen. Police found the body cold, indicating that Michelle had been dead for some time. She was lying face down with her left arm underneath her body. There were no wounds, bruises, or injuries that would indicate a violent death. It appeared that Michelle had fallen asleep and never woke up. Police believe that Michelle, 24, died of natural causes. Her body was sent for an autopsy and police conducted standard procedures, interviewed neighbors, and asked forensic experts to examine the scene. No fingerprints or DNA were found near the body, and neighbors did not hear or see anything suspicious. Police believe Michelle had used illegal drugs and died of an overdose. Police searched the apartment for drugs or paraphernalia but found nothing. There were only a few bottles of beer in the refrigerator. Next to Michelle's body on the bed was a half-empty beer bottle, which had only her fingerprints on it. As a precaution, the opened bottle was sent to a lab to be tested for any foreign substances or possible poisoning. Tests showed that nothing had been added to the beer. The medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of Michelle's death. She appeared to be completely healthy, with no illnesses other than migraines, which were unlikely to have been a significant factor. This led to many questions about how a young, healthy girl could fall asleep and not wake up. The position of her body was unusual for a natural death, raising further doubts. The expert concluded that Michelle died on the night of November 8th. The medical examiner is continuing a more thorough investigation to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the police are looking into who she might have been in contact with around that time. Initially, questions emerged regarding Michelle's boyfriend, Jason, who was the first to arrive at her apartment and call the police. How did he end up there when he lived 500 kilometers away in a different city? Police brought Jason to the police station for questioning. Jason explained that he hadn't been able to contact Michelle for 2 days. Concerned, he drove over 5 hours overnight to check on her. Upon arriving on the morning of November 10th, he knocked on her door, but no one answered. He continued calling and knocking without success. Seeing Michelle's car in the parking lot, hearing her dog barking inside, and her phone ringing, he feared something was wrong. Looking through the window, he saw Michelle lying motionless on the bed. He then immediately called 911. The police arrived, broke down the door and found Michelle's body in the apartment. Jason appeared very sad and distressed. He had an alibi for the time of Michelle's death because he was in another city, so the police released him. The medical examiner provided new information after a careful examination of Michelle's body. A small needle wound was found on her left hand, located under her body. Police contacted her doctor to see if Michelle had undergone any tests or procedures the day before, but the doctor said no. The needle wound was in an unusual location, atypical for an injection. No illegal substances were found in her home and toxicology tests showed no illegal substances in her system. Police also observed that a trash bag may have been missing from Michelle's apartment. They speculate that someone injected something into Michelle, causing her death, and then threw the trash bag away to remove the evidence. Police searched the trash cans on the street near her home and found Michelle's trash because it had not been collected. They found checks and letters with her name on them, along with a syringe and a bottle of painkillers. This prescription drug is very dangerous and an overdose can be fatal. Toxicology testing for this drug had never been done before because it requires a special test. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy had never encountered this drug in her many years of practice. When the final test was done, it was found that Michelle's body contained a very high concentration of the drug, which caused her death without leaving any trace. This drug is not commonly used for general use. It is mainly used by anesthesiologists during surgery. The police interviewed Michelle's friend Jessica and learned about her complicated relationships with Jason, Scott, and Oliver. This information intrigued the police, as they suspected that one of these men might have harmed Michelle out of jealousy. However, who could it have been? Jason had already been ruled out as a suspect. According to a friend, Michelle's relationship with Scott was very brief and hadn't really developed. He understood when Michelle returned to her ex and stayed out of her life. Michelle was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to be with him, while she saw Oliver as just a friend, although he wanted more from her. Oliver soon became a suspect. In hindsight, Jessica realized there were many warning signs in Oliver's behavior. He followed Michelle everywhere, but it seemed sweet and innocent, so no one saw him as a threat. During a conversation with the police, Michelle's grief-stricken mother mentioned that the last time she spoke to her daughter was around 11 p.m. on November 7th. This made her the last person to speak with Michelle. Michelle's final words to her mother were that Oliver was supposed to come over to help her fill out some documents. The police found it strange that she invited a guy over late at night, especially when he had feelings for her and she didn't like him. There had to be a reason for this. It was revealed that Oliver worked in the hospital's surgical department and had access to a variety of drugs, including painkillers. He had previously helped Michelle with her migraines. Michelle's landlord, Peter, came to the police station to share a strange story about her. About a week before Michelle died, Peter needed to pick up some things from her apartment but couldn't get in touch with her. This was unusual for Michelle, who always paid her rent on time, kept the apartment clean, and didn't ignore him. Concerned, Peter went to the apartment and knocked on the door, but it took a long time for anyone to answer. Finally, a shirtless man with messy black hair and glasses opened the door. He looked outside for a moment and said that this wasn't a good time. Peter explained that he needed to get his things. However, the The man slammed the door shut and told Peter to come back in a few hours. Peter was confused and did not understand the situation. After he left, Michelle called him back to apologize for the unpleasant situation. She explained that she had a severe migraine and her friend was treating her. Peter saw a picture of Oliver and recognized him as the man in Michelle's apartment. The police found a butterfly needle in Michelle's bag at her apartment. This type of needle is often used to inject drugs. Jessica confirmed that Oliver had given Michelle medication to relieve her migraine. Jessica also mentioned that Michelle was afraid of regular needles, so Oliver used a small butterfly syringe instead. Michelle could not inject the needle herself because she was too afraid to even look at it. If she injected the drug incorrectly, she would die immediately. So the drug was administered by someone with medical knowledge. This again pointed to Oliver's involvement. The police finally understood why Michelle had remained friends with Oliver and invited him to her home. He had provided her with a strong painkiller. Police did not find Oliver's fingerprints on the syringe or vial. He may have worn gloves and disposed of them elsewhere, leaving only Michelle's DNA. To charge him, the police would need to link the syringe to Oliver. The vials had a unique identification number, indicating they came from the department where Oliver worked. The drugs were stored in a special refrigerator that required a patient number and staff name to retrieve the drugs. This discovery confirmed that Oliver had taken the vials. Later, the police went to the hospital to talk to Oliver, but he did not show up for work. It was discovered that he had been fired on November 9th, shortly after Michelle's murder. Police suspected that he had been fired for using dangerous drugs, but hospital management denied this, saying that Oliver had been fired because his skills did not meet their standards. However, rumors circulated in the hospital that Oliver had been fired due to a shortage of medication. The police found out that Oliver was working at another clinic. They went to the clinic and spoke to a nurse who was surprised to see them. Oliver was then taken to the police station for questioning. He said that he had heard about Michelle's death from someone and expressed his condolences. The police were surprised and asked if they were close friends. Oliver replied that they were just acquaintances. The police then asked why he talked to her on the phone every day. Oliver did not answer. Instead, he said that he had to get back to work and left. At that time, the police did not have a warrant for his arrest. Oliver calmly arrived on campus and collected his things. The guy told Jessica at the end that he was going on vacation and left. It turned out that Oliver went to visit his ex-wife and daughter and then flew to his homeland in Ireland. There, he received a license and got a job at the hospital. After the police took the bottle of painkillers used on Michelle for analysis, the DNA test results came back. Confirmed that there was Oliver's DNA on the bottle cap, indicating that he had injected Michelle with a fatal dose of the drug. The police discovered that Oliver had left but was unable to act, despite having a warrant for his arrest. Extradition to the United States is often controversial for countries that oppose the death penalty. In this case, an Irish journalist alerted the police to Michelle's story. He proposed publishing an article detailing Michelle's death and highlighting Oliver's possible involvement, including his photograph and arrest warrant, to alert the public. The police approved and the article was published in April 2006. Upon reading the article, Oliver fled the country to Africa, where he had previously worked, fearing public backlash. He was eventually tracked down, arrested, and extradited to the US, where he was jailed. Oliver was charged with Michelle's murder but pleaded not guilty. His lawyers argued it was an accident, claiming that Michelle had requested Oliver to inject her with drugs for pain relief. That evening, Oliver miscalculated the dose, inadvertently giving her a lethal amount, leading to her death. The dose administered was 4 times the lethal amount, which was surprising since no one could believe an experienced nurse familiar with the drug would make such an error. Oliver did not apologize to the deceased's family for this mistake. The prosecutor had a different theory, suggesting that Oliver killed Michelle out of jealousy and revenge, as he did not want to share her with another man. It was alleged that he deliberately gave her the fatal dose with the intent to murder. During the trial, witnesses stated that Oliver was in love with Michelle and had been stalking her. Additionally, Oliver's cellmate testified that Oliver confessed to being deeply in love with Michelle, but she did not return his feelings. Oliver overheard a conversation between Michelle and Jason, where she professed her love for Jason and said Oliver meant nothing to her. Feeling humiliated by this, Oliver allegedly decided to take revenge by ending her life. Oliver had gained Michelle's trust through his medical care. However, he exploited this trust by injecting her with a quadruple lethal dose of medication. As a result, the jury convicted Oliver O'Quinn of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence without the chance for parole. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lin Ernan. In Wisconsin, USA, there is a small town with a population of around 15,000, located near Milwaukee. On October 3, 2018, the tranquility of this town was shattered when Jesse Kerchevsky, the caregiver for Lin Ernan, called 911. Jesse reported finding 62-year-old Lin. There was no sign of life in her apartment, sitting in a reclined position amid a mess of scattered medications. Jesse informed the dispatcher that Lin had been experiencing severe stomach pains for several months, which had been worsening over time. This pain may have led Lin to take a lethal dose of medications. When emergency services arrived, the doctors confirmed Lin Ernan's death, which was presumed to be due to poisoning. It was essential to perform all necessary tests, including toxicology, to determine the cause of Lin's death. They took her to the forensic experts table, where blood was drawn, tissue samples were examined. And an unusual finding was a very high level of tetrazolin A. While this substance is found in certain drugs, none of the tablets located around the body contained it. As it turns out, tetrazolin A is found in some eye drops sold without a prescription, which are used to relieve eye redness and inflammation. This is particularly useful for allergic reactions and mild eye fatigue, and a few drops are typically sufficient. While these eye drops are safe when applied to the eyes, they can be harmful and even dangerous if ingested, especially in large amounts. Ingesting a significant quantity can lead to serious consequences, including vomiting, internal bleeding, memory loss, and even death at high doses. This aligns with the nurse's description of the prolonged suffering from stomach pain experienced by Lin. The medical examiner's court was alarmed by the unusual circumstances surrounding Lin's death, as there are much less painful and quicker ways to die. At 62, she likely did not want to endure suffering for months before dying. It appeared that her pain was due to a gradual increase in tetrazolin A levels in her blood. Based on this, the expert suggested that she might have been murdered. After reviewing the autopsy report, detectives concurred and initiated a criminal investigation. Lin Ernan had no children and had outlived all her relatives. The first person police contacted to gather details about her death, even before the toxicology report was complete, was her nurse, 39-year-old Jesse Kerchevsky. Jesse had been caring for Lin, who lived alone, for several years, and their relationship was described as friendly. Lin saw Jesse not just as a nurse, but as a true confidant. About 5 years prior to the incident, Lin struggled with both physical and mental health issues, including depression and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So she needed to be supervised, however, but no one in her family could help her. She dealt with several illnesses, but the most agonizing was her stomach pain. In the final months of her life, she could only consume soup due to intestinal problems. Jesse carefully overseen her diet and medication. Following the incident, Jesse was promptly called to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts were analyzing the body and gathering materials for a toxicology test. Initially, it seemed that police was simply obtaining information from Jesse. However, it quickly became clear that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. During the inquiry, both Jesse and her mother, Jennifer Flower, were present. Jesse's mother was worried because she believed her daughter might be in danger. She felt the detectives were overly focused on Jesse and might be trying to accuse her of murder. Ironically, her concerns only increased suspicion towards Jesse instead of alleviating it. The police tried to clarify with Jesse the cause that led to Lin's tragic end. They questioned Jesse about why Lin chose to end her life in such a dramatic manner. At this time, no one doubted Jesse's account. She genuinely believed Lin had died by taking a lethal dose of drugs voluntarily. However, Jesse's behavior has made the police suspicious. Detectives were trying to determine if there were any underlying factors related to Lin's death, such as a depressive state. They wondered if she had previously attempted to end her life and what could have caused the severe stomach pains she experienced. However, Jesse was unable to provide any answers. It appeared that she was not only grieving the loss of her employer but also withholding important information. Ultimately, Jesse was released due to a lack of evidence. The investigators were awaiting the official conclusions from a forensic expert following a toxicological examination. After the police became suspicious of Nurse Jennifer, they began to keep an eye on her mother, Jennifer. They interviewed Jennifer and learned that she had been a close friend of Lin. She had helped her daughter, Jessie, secure a job with Lin's home. Together, they provided care for Lin, assisted Lin in dealing with age-related issues, care, and providing everything else needed. However, Jennifer also raised suspicions among the police. At this time, the toxicology results appear to be particularly worrying. Given Lin's age and health issues, it was unlikely that she had been ingesting eye drops orally for an extended period. Investigators needed to figure out how such a large quantity of the drug ended up in her system. Experts indicated that a lethal dose of the substance would require at least 4 bottles, while the results suggested Lin had consumed at least 6 bottles, which should have led to severe stomach cramps and pain before her death. Shortly after Lin's death, an unusual situation arose. Jesse and Jennifer purchased a new, large, and expensive television, even though their income was modest. Additionally, the police found the car that Lin had given to her nurse, Jessie, to be suspicious. Investigators noted the peculiar behavior of Jesse and Jennifer, which increasingly suggested that Lin's death was not voluntary. Typically, criminals attempt to cover up their actions and hide evidence to evade justice, but this situation appeared to be different. Besides, Jesse and Jennifer showed no signs of grief. Instead, they seemed to revel in the inheritance, which deepened the suspicions against them. The police began to suspect that Jesse might have orchestrated the murder. Jennifer did not have regular access to Lin's apartment, but Jesse visited Lin almost daily, allowing her easy access to Lin's food and medicine. Jesse insisted that she truly loved Lin and wanted to help Lin. The two had become like family. However, the detectives suspected that Lin had made a serious mistake by allowing someone who could potentially harm her into her life. The suspects, Jesse and Jennifer, stayed attentive to the investigation, frequently calling the police station to check on the case's progress. The detectives realized that Jesse and Jennifer weren't genuinely concerned about what had happened. Rather, they were worried about being found out. Their behavior indicated they were closely monitoring the investigation. More evidence of Jesse and Jennifer's involvement and a thorough investigation were necessary to ensure justice. Jesse and her mother noticed that the police had taken a greater interest in their activities. During each visit to the station, Jesse felt compelled to defend herself. She said had a close relationship with Lin and they treated each other like family. Jessie argued that any suspicions against her were baseless, insisting it was just a coincidence that she was a nurse and always in close contact with Lin. Being a nurse did not make her a killer, but the detectives relied on more than just assumptions. Initially, Jessie did not mention on the increased levels of tetrazzolina found in Lin's blood. However, when she was cornered, she revealed that Lin frequently used these eye drops and might have applied them without realizing it. Jessie attributed this to Lin's cognitive issues, which sometimes caused her to lose control over her actions. However, the police quickly identified a key witness named Andrew Pooh. Although he was not related to Lin, he described their relationship as close and friendly. Lin had lived with Andrew's family, and he saw Lin as his grandmother, she even helping him financially during his college years. Since she had no children, Lin wanted to leave Andrew an inheritance, but he declined to avoid any suspicion of wanting money. Despite his refusal, Lin insisted on naming him as her heir since she had no other beneficiaries. However, they never had the chance to finalize this arrangement. According to Andrew, Lin had proposed leaving him an inheritance between $10,000 and $50,000. He frequently visited Lin and knew Jessie, her nurse. Andrew suspects that Lin's death may have been related to Jessie's fear of losing her inheritance, especially since she knew that Lin intended to leave her fortune to Andrew. After Lin passed away, Jessie unexpectedly inherited all of Lin's property, which raised suspicions. Andrew approached Jessie hoping to receive part of the inheritance, but she claimed that Lin had many debts and hadn't paid her bills for a long time. As a result, Jessie said most of the inheritance would go towards settling those debts. This led Andrew decided to consult lawyers to verify this information. After that, Jessie got in touch and arranged to meet with Andrew. She gave him documents that she proved Lin's debt had been repaid. After settling all debts, Jessie said she had only $26,000 left and offered to share it with Andrew. However, when the police investigated, they discovered that these documents were fake, created using a computer program. It turned out Jessie hadn't paid anyone. This discovery led investigators to take a closer look at Lin's financial situation. They quickly learned that during her time as a nurse, Jessie had conducted suspicious transactions involving Lin's finances. She applied for a loan to the bank, the application was approved, and as a result the loan was disbursed. Even though the loans were in Lin's name, Jessie was the one who actually used the funds. Ultimately, it was revealed that over the years, she had taken out about $300 in loans, of which only $88 was left by the time of the police investigation. In response to the financial claims made by the police officers, Jessie maintained that she acted at Lin's request. She stated that Lin provided the necessary documents for the loans and frequently asked her to purchase eye drops. Jessie mentioned that she had 4 bottles on hand, which Lin had given her, and noted that she saw Lin using the product correctly. She insisted that she did not supervise this process. However, police were skeptical of her account. At the crime scene, there were no eye drop bottles found near the body. Instead, pills were littered around, and no traces of those pills were found in Lin's body. Lin was said to have kept her bottle of eye drops on her nightstand, but a thorough search of the apartment revealed they were missing. The situation became increasingly complicated, suggesting that someone had staged the scene. It appeared that it had been discarded to hide evidence. The forensic expert believed that Lin had been ingesting the eye drops for an extended period, leading to poisoning, severe pain, and ultimately death. It seemed unlikely that Lin could have used such a large quantity on her own. This indicates that someone has poisoned her. Jessie, who spent the most time with Lin and managed her diet and medications, emerged as the primary suspect. Suspicious thing, the detectives did not contact Jessie or summon her for questioning. Instead, she frequently visited the police station to ask about the investigation's progress. Jessie maintained that she had no motive to harm Lin and denied any involvement in financial fraud. However, the circumstances surrounding the drugs continued to trouble the investigators, who began to apply pressure on Jessie. She shared bizarre stories about how Lin supposedly enjoyed mixing vodka with eye drops, claiming this gave Lin extra enjoyment from the drink. Jessie insisted she was unaware that regular eye drops could be dangerous and viewed it as just one of Lin's eccentric habits. Jessie stated that on that fateful morning, she brought 4 additional bottles of eye drops to Lin's apartment and claimed that Lin even mixed them into her water. This situation continued for about 6 months until a tragic conclusion, making the story increasingly bizarre. Despite the circumstantial evidence gathered by investigators, detectives believed Jessie was fabricating excuses. Ultimately, they decided to arrest Jessie on suspicion of premeditated murder. Evidence from the crime scene, including Jessie's cell phone, was sent for analysis, which provided the police with more information. They discovered that Jessie was in regular contact with her boyfriend, Scott Craig. The conversations between Jessie and Scott particularly caught the attention of police. It became evident that Jessie's assertion of being unaware of the dangers of ingesting eye drops was untrue. She had been researching this information online for some time. By the time she started caring for Lin, she was already knowledgeable about products containing the harmful substance, suggesting she had intentionally chosen medications that contained it in high amounts. Jessie first considered using eye drops as a way to poison Lin because they could be easily purchased without a prescription. All she needed to do was persuade Lin to take them orally or secretly mix them into Lin's food or drink. Due to Lin's cognitive difficulty, so this seemed simple. From Jessie and Scott's conversations, it seemed he was unaware that Jessie was attempting to poison Lin. However, a few months before the incident, a conversation revealed that Jessie had mentioned Lin's serious illness, including episodes of vomiting blood, which led to Lin being hospitalized. Doctors later reported that she had been poisoned. The investigation showed that Jessie must have known the consequences of her actions. The police looked into Scott's potential involvement and brought him in for questioning. He denied any knowledge of the poisoning plan but claimed that Jessie had informed him about Lin's previous poisonings. Scott viewed Jessie as a pathological liar, and their relationship was close to ending. He thought Jessie fabricated the poisoning story to gain his sympathy and reconcile with him. During another conversation in September, Jessie claimed Lin was hospitalized and on medication, stating that Lin is in intensive care and is on life support machines. In reality, Lin had already passed away. Scott was fed up with the relationship and wanted to end it that day. However, Jessie attempted to manipulate him again by claiming that Lin was in the hospital, hoping to elicit his sympathy. She was trying to hold on to their relationship. The situation was complicated. Was it a fatal overdose, or a carefully planned scheme to obtain an inheritance? It turns out there was a clear motive in Jessie's actions. Over time, motivation will reveal itself. It is possible that Lin found out about this, leading to her murder. Jessie then took possession of Lin's property and money. Additionally, Jessie was desperate to keep her relationship with Scott, who had mentioned breaking up multiple times. Jessie concealed the true state of Lin's, creating a web of lies that made it hard to uncover the truth. Investigators found that Jessie refused to admit her guilt. She maintained that Lin consumed 100 liters of vodka daily and added eye drops to it. In October 2023, the investigation revealed the full extent of Jessie's financial fraud. It was found that since 2016, Lin's credit limit had increased from almost $0 to $72,000. This was just the beginning. After her death, nearly $16,000 was stolen from her apartment, which was allegedly used to pay off some debts. Jessie claimed she only repaid loans that were in Lin's name, but the source of these funds was traced. The total debts amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars, taken out from banks under Lin's name. Additionally, items worth $155 were stolen from Lin's home. Initially, these items were reported missing, but it was later discovered that Jessie started receiving money in her accounts shortly thereafter, likely from the sale of Lin's possessions. Lin was a wealthy single woman who rarely used credit cards or loans. Additionally, the sudden rapid increase in debt that shortly after she hiring a new nurse, Jessie, seemed suspicious. Reports indicated that Jessie visited the casino every month, gambling large amounts with her boyfriend Scott, who didn't question where the money was coming from. They often went to gambling establishments at least twice a month. The investigation revealed that Jessie had a prior criminal record. Despite being young, she had a significant history of offenses, including document forgery, fraud, and gambling. Since 2010, Jessie struggled with a severe gambling addiction. In February of that year, she defrauded two individuals out of $4,000 by taking out loans in their names. Although she didn't use fake documents, it was shown that she obtained these funds through deceitful methods. By April 2010, she had lost over $45,000. During this time, she borrowed an additional $2,500 and applied for a loan exceeding $6,000, falsely claiming that her mother, Jennifer, had approved it by using her mother's documents. This was, of course, a lie. Jessie managed to secure over $6,500 in credit using her mother's car as collateral, but she never repaid this amount. As a result, her mother nearly lost her car and had to gather a large amount of documentation to prove that she was not responsible for those loans. Jessie was imprisoned for 2 years but was released early due to good behavior. Her mother stated that she struggled with a severe gambling addiction. The prosecutor's office claimed that 25-year-old Jessie committed premeditated murder to gain financial benefits from her victim, Lin. By doing so, she attempted to eliminate her own debts. It is alleged that she killed Lin, who had endured pain and progressive for years, without considering the consequences. Jessie described the act as one of mercy, said that she could no longer bear to see Lin suffer. The lawyers argued that Jessie did not kill Lin. They explained that Lin had cognitive impairments and did not understand the risks of type of eye drops she was taking. They stated that Lin believed that drinking vodka mixed with eye drops would help her sleep better, leading her to use the drops without realizing the danger. According to the prosecution, on the day of the murder, Jessie provided Lin with water that contained the contents of 6 eye drop bottles. However, the lethal dose was only 1 bottle. In court, both Jessie and Jennifer testified that Lin consumed the water with the 6 bottles of drops. Initially, Jessie, who was a nurse, advised Lin against using the drops, but after a lengthy argument, Jessie eventually relented, unaware of the severe outcomes that could result. Afterward, Jessie left for a few hours on business, not knowing how much of the substance Lin had actually consumed or how it would affect her. Especially since Lin had previously been hospitalized for poisoning from the drops. Lin was aware of the dangers associated with eye drops, which made the idea of her accidental poisoning implausible. Jessie also knew about the harmful effects of these substances, and a key point against her was that no bottles of the eye drops were found near Lin's body. It was evident that someone assisted Lin in taking the medicine. The trial was intense and emotional, with the judge actively engaging in discussions. On November 14, 2023, the jury convicted Jessie of first-degree murder, theft, and concealment of evidence. Upon hearing the verdict, Jessie broke down in tears. She was sentenced to life in prison but could be eligible for parole after 40 years. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kimberly Winger. Kimberly Winger was born on September 25, 1963, in Bloomington, Illinois, USA. She grew up in a family of 3 siblings. However, her parents' relationship deteriorated, eventually leading to a divorce and her mother having to take care of the children. Kimberly was healthy, beautiful, and very active. She was a member of the cheerleading squad at her school, where she was quite popular. She regularly attended cheerleading camps and was highly regarded by both teachers and students. Her outgoing personality and beauty made it easy for her to make friends and socialize with her peers. Kimberly aspired to become a film actress and even achieved some success in this field. Notably, she appeared as an extra in the famous film Grand Vue. The filming took place in 1983 in Panty, Illinois, where Kimberly decided to try her luck, and it paid off. This experience became one of the most memorable moments of her life. During this time, Kimberly's mother fulfilled her long-cherished dream of owning a business by purchasing a bar with her grandmother's inheritance. Kimberly joined her mother, hoping to become part of the business. However, disagreements over her mother's vision led Kimberly to leave the company. In 1985, Kimberly met a young man named Terry Winger and they began dating. Kimberly found him to be loving and kind. She soon became pregnant and they welcomed a daughter named Kelsey. The couple later married. Unfortunately, after the wedding, Thatcher's behavior changed, he becoming more cruel. This change, coupled with financial difficulties, made their situation tense. Despite taking care of the children, Kimberly found their finances inadequate and wanted to work part-time. However, she faced challenges in finding a suitable job. The family situation worsened and the couple later divorced. Kimberly soon began dating another man, Dale Fosdick. However, this relationship also failed. Dale admitted that he wanted to end things as soon as he learned that she was pregnant with his child. Not ready to be a father, he decided to disappear. Kimberly was devastated by the news because she had hoped to start a family with him. Her friends said that after the breakup, Kimberly felt abandoned and anxious because of 2 failed relationships. In the midst of this turmoil, Kimberly seriously considered terminating the pregnancy but ultimately decided to keep the baby. She gave birth to her second child, a boy named Logan. Although he broke up with Dale, he later showed up and agreed to support his son. He paid a small amount of child support from his salary, but he was not reliable in this regard. Dale was often late with his payments. They were inconsistent and clearly not enough to live comfortably and raise a child. As a result, Kimberly had to go to work while her friends took care of the children. At the time, Kimberly worked as a hairdresser. She also found extra income by working as a nanny and cleaning lady. This helped a little with the family's needs, but they were all on food stamps and lived quite poorly. Kimberly and her mother had a bad relationship, so her mother did not help her. When her son was very young, Kimberly met a pastor named Kurt Simon. They were both struggling financially, but despite their hardships, they developed a deep affection for each other and were happy together. Determined to find stability and face their challenges, Kurt loved Kimberly so much that he planned to adopt her children, and Logan even started calling him Dad. They seemed like a wonderful couple, happy and loving, unaware of the threat looming over them. On Saturday, May 22, 1993, at around 10:30 p.m., the couple returned home from a short trip. They had traveled to Quincy, where Kurt's parents lived, so his family could meet Kimberly and bless their upcoming wedding. During the trip, they also visited the university's theological seminary. Taking advantage of the opportunity, they arranged their engagement just a day before returning to Illinois. They gathered friends nearby to celebrate. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they seemed like the perfect couple. Close friends and family were thrilled about their decision, making this an important and joyful event for Kimberly and Kurt. Kurt returned in high spirits, eager to spend the entire weekend together. The following day, they planned to attend a concert featuring Kimberly's daughter, Kelsey. Kelsey, who studied at a music school, was recognized as a young prodigy. Her parents fully supported her and were eager to attend the event, intending to further encourage her by hosting a family gathering at a pizza parlor afterward. The couple arrived home in their family car and parked in the driveway. Kurt exited the car first to bring some luggage into the house. When he went back for the rest, he found Kimberly outside, smiling at him. She remarked that it felt warmer there compared to Iowa, her last words before she opened the front door. As Kimberly entered the house, a huge explosion suddenly occurred, violently throwing Kurt backwards. The explosion was so powerful that it woke the neighbors and shattered the windows of the surrounding houses. In shock, Kurt rushed into the ruined house and found Kimberly lying motionless on the floor. The right side of her skull was missing, destroyed by the explosion or debris. Tragically, Kurt could do nothing to save Kimberly. Kurt was in shock and couldn't believe what was happening. Luckily, the children had stayed with Kimberly's relatives and didn't join them on the trip. Kurt called 911 and stayed with her until the police arrived. The officers responded quickly and found Kurt crying, kneeling in the rubble of the house, holding his beloved's head in his arms. She was only 29 years old when she died. This event was strange and unusual for the entire local community in such a quiet place. People feared their homes might also be rigged to explode, so they asked the police for protection. Fortunately, no such threats were found. Explosives experts quickly scanned the crime scene to determine the best course of action and found a suspicious package in the hallway of the home. The package was rigged to explode if moved, activated by a button. When Kimberly entered the house, she noticed the unfamiliar package and, out of curiosity, attempted to inspect it. The package exploded at face level, killing her instantly. During the crime scene investigation, forensic experts discovered various bomb-making materials in the basement, such as wires, fuses, and battery wrappers. Discarded rubber gloves were also found in the trash. Although Kurt was present during the explosion, he suffered only minor injuries. As a result, the police initially considered him the main suspect. In full view of their shocked neighbors, Kurt was handcuffed, read his rights, and taken to the police station for questioning. He cooperated with the investigation, providing his fingerprints and DNA, and recounted the events leading up to the tragedy. Kurt was released hours later. His active cooperation in the investigation gave hope that the criminal would be apprehended soon. Considering Kurt was not involved in the incident, it is likely that the perpetrator brought the tools and parts needed to make the bomb. Since the entrance doors and windows were not damaged, it appears the attacker had a way into the house. The police thought this was a deliberate act of revenge against Kimberly. To avoid accidentally setting off the bomb while transporting it, the attacker probably put it together at the scene. The explosive was powerful and meant to destroy the house and kill everyone inside, which would also get rid of any evidence linking the attacker to the crime. Luckily, and some evidence was left intact, giving investigators important information. After Kurt was cleared of any wrongdoing by a solid alibi, the police questioned who would want to harm the Kimberly family. Kurt pointed them to Kimberly's mother, Cricket Lewis, who was now married to someone else and had a different last name. Kurt viewed Cricket as evil and the only person capable of such a terrible act. Cricket and Kimberly had a poor relationship, which prompted Cricket to resent Kurt. Kurt claimed that Cricket was only interested in running her bar and was indifferent to everything else. She was described as harsh and inexplicably hostile to others. Kimberly's relationship with her mother was strained and they rarely saw each other. Financial gain and power were very important to Cricket. She pushed her daughter to open a bar, allegedly making money through dubious means. Cricket inherited the fortune from her grandmother, who died suddenly despite being in good health. While the investigation was ongoing, no evidence was found to link Cricket to her grandmother's death, which was ruled to be due to natural causes. After Kimberly began working at Cricket's bar, she was exploited, receiving low wages and bonuses that were not as good as those of other employees. Despite trying to resolve her financial problems with the help of her loved ones, Kimberly only faced more challenges. Realizing the situation, Kimberly abandoned her delusions and left the bar. At Kimberly's funeral, Cricket seemed to be concerned only about losing Kimberly's insurance policy, which meant she would not receive financial compensation for her daughter's death. However, the police investigation found no evidence of malicious intent on Cricket's part. They found that she was focused on running her business. After carefully examining the information and witness statements, the police found that Cricket had no motive for the crime. It was concluded that she did not have the technical skills and abilities to build a bomb herself, and her alibi was found to be credible. When the investigation resumed, the next suspect was Kimberly's ex-husband, Thatcher Winger. Thatcher had been involved in a custody dispute over Kimberly, making him a possible suspect in the planning and execution of the crime. Thatcher lived only 3 kilometers from the couple and worked as an engineer, suggesting that he may have had the skills and equipment to build an explosive device. However, after examining the relationship between Kimberly and Thatcher, police found that their interactions were generally friendly, with minor disagreements resolved through simple discussions. The investigation found that Thatcher had no motive for the murder and had a credible alibi that was verified. The next suspect was Kimberly's co-worker, Phil Hartman, whom she had accused of harassment in an earlier police complaint. Phil later threatened to retaliate aggressively. He admitted that he had tried to pursue a relationship with Kimberly, but she had a negative opinion of him, which led him to abandon the relationship. However, Phil also had a confirmed alibi, as he lived far from Bloomington and was out of town when the couple returned. Police also considered Logan's father, Dale Fosdick, a suspect. Dale, 31, lived on the east side of town, near Kimberly's home, and worked in the aircraft industry, assembling miniature models. Dale's expertise with equipment and ability to overhaul automotive engines made him a potential perpetrator. Police went to Dale's home with a search warrant, and he cooperated with their investigation. They found tools for assembling a device on the kitchen table, which looked suspicious. Police also discovered a large amount of components that could be used to make explosives. Several tools were confiscated, but the most notable was a pair of pliers, as the markings on the tool matched those found on bomb components in Kimberly's home. Dale also had receipts from Walmart for ammunition and other materials that closely resembled those used to make explosive devices. When the remains of the explosives were analyzed, a forensic scientist learned that they matched the components used to make explosives found at Kimberly's home. Initially, police had little evidence because most of it had been destroyed in the explosion. Forensic analysis required examining all of the evidence under a microscope. Finally, advanced methods such as gas chromatography and mass spectrometry provide direct evidence. One expert noted a distinctive design feature: 2 holes drilled into one end of the cap, which looked like the criminal's unique signature. Law enforcement databases have about 20 records of homemade devices used in crimes, with a handful matching this design. The attacker quickly assembled a random design that fit their target. Forensic experts continue to examine the remaining pieces of the device in detail. Police knew that most of the suspects had nothing to do with the massacre. Their efforts focused on proving the guilt of Dale, who had been found with suspicious items in his home. These items were stored in a basement workshop. Dale was a lonely young man living in a small house in the suburbs of Bloomington. He became upset when he discovered that his ex-girlfriend was engaged to someone else, which may have led to feelings of jealousy and revenge. This gave him a real motive for the crime, making him one of the few acquaintances of the victim to have such a motive. Forensic experts also identified other important details. The attacker used 2 different types of gunpowder, which when combined, increased the force of the explosion. A look at the crime scene showed that the explosion was so powerful that most of Kimberly's house was destroyed. Many who knew Dale believed that he could not have committed such a crime. Usually, such thoughts do not occur to good people. Police searched for any signs of cruelty or aggression in Dale's past before this violent incident. He had no history of violent crimes, legal problems, arrests for similar crimes, or drug addictions. According to many, he had recently shown concern for his child and was trying to improve his relationship with Kimberly. However, because of certain items found in his home, he became the prime suspect. He was arrested for first-degree murder and held in state prison while awaiting trial. The first trial was declared invalid due to insufficient evidence. During the hearing, a juror became ill and was unable to continue, leading to a second trial. At trial, the defense presented Dale as a devoted father and a kind, humble man, arguing that he was incapable of committing a heinous and vicious crime. His attorneys emphasized his role as a caring and loving father to convince the jury of his innocence. Dale initially objected to his girlfriend's pregnancy and fatherhood because he felt he was too young. When Kimberly decided to keep the child, he shunned her. However, he later realized his mistake and completely changed his attitude. He decided to accept paternity and aimed to restore his relationship with both his son and Kimberly, even hoping to marry her. Dale argued that there was no reason for him to harm the woman with whom he planned to start a family. On Dale's side, even the mother of the Kimberly supported him. Cricket was still convinced that her fiancé, Kurt Simon, was the murderer. The mother claimed that Kurt, who was aspiring to be a pastor, had recently become cruel and controlling towards Kimberly. This situation led to many disagreements, but there were clear inconsistencies in her claims because Kimberly rarely communicated with her mother and couldn't have known about their relationship issues. Cricket defended the Dale in every way possible. She highlighted that Dale showed her attention and tried to gain Kimberly's trust. He frequently visited to spend time with the child and had changed significantly for the better. Dale Fosdick repeatedly expressed his love, apologized for his past decisions, and tried to win Kimberly over. However, she was firm in her commitment to her new boyfriend Kurt and had no intention of breaking up. In fact, the couple planned to get married and confirmed this by getting engaged. The prosecutor's office warned that the Kimberly's decision could have dire consequences once Dale realized there was no chance of rekindling their relationship. Seeking revenge, Dale likely targeted Kurt. Despite Dale's careful planning, the Kurt miraculously survived. During the trial, one of Kimberly's sisters and her mother supported Dale, claiming his innocence. Despite this, the prosecution made a strong case. Explosives experts provided direct evidence that a large number of parts and materials suitable for making bombs were found in his home and proved that they were used to make bombs. According to S.H. Moore, Dale expressed a willingness to support Kimberly financially, but he preferred to quit his job rather than pay alimony. Meanwhile, Kimberly wanted the financial support she was entitled to from the negligent biological father of her son, so she planned to seek justice through the court. During this time, Dale grew worried that Kimberly would move away with their son to live with her fiancé. Several of Dale's co-workers mentioned his intention to gain custody of Logan to avoid alimony payments. To achieve this, he gathered evidence to discredit Kimberly, hoping it would help him strip her of parental rights and gain custody of their son. Neighbors reported seeing Dale near Kimberly's home before the explosion. Kimberly kept a spare key under the rug, allowing Dale easy access to her home. Many described Dale as a quiet, unassuming, even shy person who seemed unlikely to commit a violent crime. He was known to avoid conflict and was always positive. However, the prosecutor's office argued that Dale's personality influenced his choice of method in eliminating his victim. Not wanting to confront Kimberly directly, he resorted to a surprise and cowardly attack using an explosive device. On February 26, 1996, the jury found Dale Fosdick guilty of first-degree murder. After the verdict, The mother of the Kimberly expressed her disagreement with the decision, stating that Dale could seek her help if he needed it. She held his hand, tears in her eyes, and kissed him on the cheek, believing he was a victim of a miscarriage of justice. Dale had 25 supporters who actively defended his innocence in court. Only one juror voted against the death penalty, which was enough to spare him from it. Consequently, he was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Cricket Lewis, Kimberly's mother, continued to fight for Dale's innocence. In May 1996, she wrote a letter to the local media. She acknowledged that her stance had caused considerable public outrage and that she had faced criticism for supporting Dale, the convicted man. She was upset when her daughter's fiancé Kurt described her as the embodiment of evil in a media interview. Cricket asserted that she mourned her daughter every day and believed that the real killer was still at large. Cricket died at 65 on December 19, 2003. Her son-in-law, Kurt Simon, became a minister at the First Presbyterian Church after her death. Right after her mother's death, Kelsey moved in with her father, Thatcher Wenger, at the Salvation Army and worked in homeless shelters. Thatcher passed away at 52 on November 27, 2003. Dale was in prison and died of natural causes at 48 in 2010. Logan graduated from college, joined the Bloomington Police Force, started a family, and has a child. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kelly Dwire. Kelly Dwire was born in 1986 in Lincolnshire, a suburb of Chicago, to a loving family. In 2002, when Kelly was 16, her parents decided to divorce, but they remained on friendliness terms for her sake. The divorce was a traumatic incident that significantly impacted her life. A year later, she graduated from high school, but she unsure of her future plans. She took a break before college and worked part-time at a restaurant. In 2008, at 22, Kelly made a big decision to move to another city to start a new life. She chose Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was about an hour from Chicago and reminded her of her hometown. The city was the largest in Wisconsin in terms of population, offering great opportunities. Kelly quickly made new friends, attended college, and got a job as a yoga instructor to pay for her tuition and accommodation. She also worked occasionally as a babysitter to tackle financial difficulties. As a child, Kelly loved visiting all the trendy, interesting, and popular places in the city. She enjoyed her life new and was making big plans for the future. The last time Kelly saw her father was a month before she disappeared, when he visited her in Milwaukee. At that time, Kelly had graduated and was working as a yoga instructor and sales clerk in a sports store. Her friends and co-workers admired her upbeat and fun personality. Kelly appeared to be happy and content with her life. She loved her job and had been in a relationship with Chris Sacco for a year. Chris was a 38-year-old successful IT manager at a trucking company. He graduated from Boston University in 2009 with a degree in international business. He had moved from New York City to Milwaukee for his job. Chris was a hardworking, decent person and have a good family. Both Kelly and Chris shared a love for sports and entertainment, seemed they like a perfect couple. Chris was already enjoying a successful career, a luxurious apartment, an expensive car, and a reasonable fortune that he had earned independently. During the investigation, detectives found that Kelly had no enemies or anyone wishing her harm. All her belongings were left at home, which ruled out the possibility of her running away. What was troubling was the complete lack of activity on her bank accounts and phone. This led police to speculate that she might be in danger. The last person to see her on October 10, 2013, was her boyfriend Chris, so the investigators asked him to come to the station for an interrogation. Chris explained that they met at his luxury apartment in Lafayette Towers, spent some time there, and left around 8 p.m. They then went to a small bar across the street from his apartment, where Chris and Kelly mingled with others and enjoyed a drink. In good spirits, they returned to his apartment around 2:30 a.m. and went to bed. Kelly left at 9 a.m., and they never saw each other again. Chris emphasized that he did not consider Kelly his girlfriend. They had an open relationship, and he was truly in love with another woman. This made the investigators curious. While Chris's story seemed quite believable, something about his words and behavior was suspicious, prompting the police to scrutinize him more closely. Detectives interviewed friends who were with Chris and Kelly that night. The friends confirmed that they all had a great time together. First, they went to the bar, and then they went outside, ordered a pizza because they were hungry, and ate it on a bench. Kelly was in a good mood and shared her plans for her day off, which included catching up on sleep, doing yoga, doing laundry, and resting. Later, Chris and Kelly went home, and they invited a friend over for another drink. The friend said she felt uncomfortable in Chris's apartment. She had a few drinks and later decided to leave. That night, Chris was smoking and chatting with a friend, while Kelly seemed a bit down. The friend thought Kelly was just tired and decided to leave the apartment to give them space. After speaking with Kelly's other girlfriends, the investigator discovered that the relationship between Chris and Kelly was not as good as it appeared. Kelly was genuinely in love with Chris, but he didn't seem as invested. Chris wasn't making any plans for a future together, which concerned Kelly. She suspected he might be having an affair and thought they might break up soon. As a result, Kelly felt there was no future with Chris and began looking for other options. She signed up for a dating site and began chatting with different guys, although she hadn't met them in person yet. Kelly's friends pointed out that they had seen bruises on her arms and neck. Curiously, when they asked about the bruises, Kelly always turned it into a joke, called it a crazy night, and immediately changed the subject. Her friends suspected these could be signs of violence, but Kelly never confirmed this thing. By that time, CCTV footage from Chris's house had been reviewed. It showed Chris and Kelly returning drunk to the apartment at night. But Kelly was never seen leaving. This footage contradicted Chris's claim that Kelly left his home at 9 a.m. the following morning. Turns out another friend of Chris had been in the apartment that night and said he'd done substances with Chris. With this information, the detectives got a search warrant for the apartment and went to Chris's house. Inside, they found various substances, pills, pipes, and other items, and arrested Chris for possession. The detectives also noticed something odd, a torn curtain in the bathroom. The curtain was missing, and the hooks where it hung were damaged, as if the curtain had been forcefully ripped off. During the interrogation, Chris appeared calm and confirmed that he had used substances, but he denied trading them. The police accessed Chris's cell phone and started investigating it. They found frightening materials, photos of a naked, unconscious girl on his bed, as well as a video of Chris sexually abusing the girl and seemingly strangling her. They suspicions that Chris was drugging the girl to take advantage of her. These materials were included as evidence in the case of Kelly's disappearance. The police went back to Chris's apartment with a cadaver-sniffing dog. The dog signaled at the bed and the bathroom in the apartment, and then pointed towards the front door. Later, it led the officers to Chris's car in the parking lot, as well as to some trash bins. By then, the investigators were already sure that the missing person was dead, and Chris became the main suspect in the case. She spent the last minutes of her life in his apartment, and then he took her body out and transported it in a car. It's still not known how Chris managed to discreetly get Kelly's body into the car without being caught by any of the 28 security cameras. While the police continued investigating, they checked Chris's computer and found explicit photos of babies. He was charged with possession of this material. At that time, Chris was out on bail awaiting trial, and investigators were still looking for evidence in Kelly's body to charge him. Remembering what Chris had told them about another girl he was secretly dating, detectives began to look into his double life. The young woman was named Megan, and she had been dating Chris for about 3 years. However, Megan doesn't know that Kelly is involved in Chris's life. The detectives went to talk to Megan and showed her photos of Chris's apartment. Upon examining them closely, Megan realized that some things were missing. In the bathroom, there was no shower curtain, rug, or several towels. In the bedroom, a large golf bag that was always kept there was missing. Based on the description, the detectives assumed that Kelly's body could have fit in such a bag. After reviewing all the building's entrances and exits, the police determined that Chris could have used an alternative path to reach the car without being seen. It seems he had thoroughly studied the house beforehand to plan this path. Parking lot camera footage captured Chris arriving with a large bag, which he placed in the trunk. He drove away from the house at 10:06 a.m. on October 11th, and at 10:08 a.m., Kelly's phone was permanently disconnected at the same location. Over the following 8 hours, footage showed Chris returning to the house multiple times, loading items into his car, finally he leaving at 6:16 p.m. He did not come back until the next day. When investigators asked him about the items he was transporting, Chris claimed he was moving his summer sports equipment to his mother's house. However, no one believed his explanation. That day at 7:30 p.m., Chris was supposed to meet Megan. However, she reported that he was over an hour late. Detectives suspected that during this time, Chris was searching for a place to dispose of Kelly's body, which explained his tardiness. Tracking Chris's movements was impossible because his phone had been turned off since the morning. Being an experienced IT professional, Chris likely knew that keeping his phone on would make police it easy to trace his location through phone records. Megan testified that Chris was acting differently that night. He appeared agitated and nervous. He was fiddling with his phone and said it wasn't working, which made him late. After their date, they went to Megan's apartment and stayed the night. Chris was so stressed that he couldn't sleep and was sweating heavily, so much so that Megan had to change the sheets in the morning. The investigators believed Chris was anxious because Kelly's body was still in his trunk, making him fearful of being discovered. He was trying to find a place to hide Kelly's remains. On the morning of October 12th, he said goodbye to Megan and departed. Earlier, he had tried to persuade Megan to urgently move with him to another city, Denver, but she declined. The police officers tracked Chris's location using the car's GPS and found that he was heading to a place called Cheese House, a cheese store located 130 kilometers from Milwaukee. It seemed unusual for Chris to drive such a long distance early in the morning just to buy cheese. However, Chris claimed he went there to purchase cheese for his parents, and he even had a receipt showing a purchase at 9:55 a.m. on October 12th. His parents confirmed he had indeed brought them cheese. Still, it was hard to believe his story, because the same type of cheese could easily have been bought at a local supermarket nearby. The police suspected this area was where Chris had hidden Kelly's body. It was later revealed that Chris stopped at a sports store around noon on his way back and bought new sneakers, which raised suspicions. Detectives thought this was intentional. They believed Chris wanted to dispose of an old pair of shoes because it might have blood on them, or at the spot where he hid Kelly's body there may have been footprints from his old sneakers. Chris considered everything carefully and got rid of all the evidence, creating an alibi for himself. He is very good at analysis and wanted to commit the perfect crime, but the investigators were able to prove he was lying. The distance from the cheese store to the sports shop was about 80 kilometers, a trip he would have made in around an hour. So why did he show up at the store more than 2 hours later? All signs pointed to him doing something else for another hour, probably hiding the body. Police believe Chris hid the bag containing Kelly's body somewhere along the route and disposed of it there. The police were looking for Kelly, but without a specific location, the search was difficult and inconclusive. The entire 80 kilometers route was the search area, which was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Meanwhile, in November 2014, Chris Sacco went on trial for possessing illegal substances and explicit photos of children. He pleaded guilty and received a 19-year prison sentence. The roadside search continued, and they eventually succeeded. A local resident walking in a wooded area about 60 kilometers from the city discovered human remains near the road. Dental records later confirmed them as those of Kelly Dwire. The resident quickly reported the discovery to the sheriff's office, who immediately suspected it was Kelly's body, which they had been searching for in that area for a long time. The discovery finally ended the search for Kelly, bringing some peace to her parents after a year and a half. Now, they needed to seek justice for her and determine the exact cause of death. The cause could not be identified from the skeleton alone. The medical examiner suggested that the girl might have been strangled, but the force was not strong enough, so the hyoid bone was not broken. There was no evidence at the location where the body was found, no torn curtain, mat, towels, or even a bag. However, the position of the body was unusual. The skeleton was found face down, with one arm under the torso, and the legs bent, suggesting the body had been in a narrow space for some time after death. This further confirmed that Kelly had been hidden in that golf bag. Chris was seen on his home cameras with the bag and also driving down the road with it, disposing of the body, but all of this was circumstantial evidence. There was no direct proof that Chris had committed the crime, so the detectives continued to investigate the case. They were not in a rush because he was already in jail. It was not until 5 years after Kelly's disappearance that he was finally charged. The charges were negligent homicide and hiding the body. The police could not prove that the murder was planned in advance. They believed that on that night, the situation was similar to what investigators found in a video. Chris became intimate with her, lost control during strangulation, and accidentally killed her. He then tore down the bathroom curtain, rug, and towels, wrapped the body, put it in a bag, thoroughly cleaned the house, and disposed of the body. Chris claimed he was innocent of Kelly's murder. During the trial, CCTV footage was shown, along with a video from Chris's cell phone capturing the strangulation, and evidence from a canine inspection of his apartment was presented. Megan, who testified against him, stated he was unusually nervous and late for a meet on that day. Chris's ex-girlfriends also testified, saying he had a disturbing fascination with choking in rough sex, which frightened them. The defense argued that there was no direct evidence against Chris and that the prosecution just was based on speculation. They highlighted that Chris had no previous arrests or convictions, except for a substance possession case. He was a successful IT professional and valued employee with a respectable family, and they contended he was not capable of murder. Not all CCTV recordings were preserved before the trial, so the prosecution couldn't prove for sure that Kelly hadn't left the house. The defense even brought forward a witness during the trial who claimed to have seen a girl who looked like Kelly the weekend after she disappeared, in another man's car. They had seen her picture on TV as a missing person, but the witness wasn't completely sure it was her. All of this led the lawyer to hypothesize that Kelly left Chris' apartment and was then set up by one of her new boyfriends met through the dating website. The defense counsel argued that there is no way to confirm what exactly the dog detected because there is no video recording. As a result, which could be subjective. In contrast, the prosecution countered that the observe was conducted as objectively as possible, with many police officers present, and they all agreed on the results. At that time, Kelly had already stopped communicating, was not answering calls or messages, and was not active on social media, which was unusual for her, suggesting she was already dead. The prosecutor persuaded the jury that Chris was responsible for the murder. Chris was the only one who could have done it, and he cleverly planned everything and disposed of the evidence, leaving no direct proof of his involvement. The jury deliberated for a long time but ultimately found Chris Zacco guilty of first-degree negligent homicide and concealing the body. Kelly's family and the prosecution requested the maximum sentence of 48 years in prison, while the defense attorney asked for the sentence to be reduced to 22 years. In December 2018, Chris Zacco, aged 43, was sentenced to 31 years in prison, 26 years for manslaughter and 5 years for concealing the body. He is currently held at the Green Bay Correctional Facility in Wisconsin. He will be eligible for parole in 2065 at the age of 90. Chris attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeals were denied. Kelly's family is satisfied with the sentence, as it effectively means he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Valyriia Vivano. Valyriia Vivano was born on May 29, 1996, in La Granja, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital. She was the youngest of 3 children in a modest family, with her parents Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. She grew up with her older brother Michelangelo and sister Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother stayed at home to care for the children and create a warm family atmosphere. When Valyriia started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock for her. Even though they continued to communicate after the divorce and her father is still very interested in his children's lives, including providing financial support, Valyriia felt resentment towards him. They sometimes argued and went months without speaking, but they always managed to reconcile. Soon after the divorce, Miguel remarried, and Valyriia gained 2 half-siblings. She maintained warm family relationships with them, as well as with her siblings, Daniela and Michelangelo. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried. She focused on raising her children and later took care of her grandchildren. From a young age, Valyriia showed a strong character, determination, and remarkable perseverance in everything she did. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and was always brave and fair, willing to help others, even when it put her at risk. She pursued a career in law enforcement because of her desire to help people in need and fight for justice. After finishing high school, Valyriia enrolled in a police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016, becoming an investigator. At just 20 years old, she joined the Chilean police force. The following year, she started working in the bureau that investigates serious crimes in the capital. From the very beginning, Valyriia demonstrated her commitment as a law enforcement officer and her passion for justice. She loved her job, carried out her responsibilities with care, and was always ready to respond to emergencies, even in the middle of the night. She would rush to crime scenes, pursue criminals, and sometimes had to provide emotional support to people who had lost loved ones. Her colleagues described Valyriia as kind, cheerful, and friendly, while also recognizing her as a true professional and a dependable partner. Valyriia served in the police force for nearly 5.5 years, during which she received numerous awards and recognition. She advanced in her career, gaining the respect of her colleagues and the admiration of her superiors. She also represented her department in Spain, spending about 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit. She took great pride in being entrusted with such significant responsibilities. By 2020, she had been promoted to assistant inspector. In January 2020, Valyriia welcomed a new member to her precinct, 21 years old Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, who had just graduated from the police academy. Valyriia took on the role of his mentor as he started his first job. A few months later, they became partners and initially got along well. Lionel comes from a wealthy and powerful family, with an uncle who is a high-ranking official. Having grown up in comfort and always getting what he wanted, because of this, he became quite selfish and believed that everything should go his way. Valyriia noticed her new colleague, Lionel, who repeatedly tried to get her attention and asked her out several times. Each time, she firmly rejected him. Valyriia was serious about her job and believed that workplace romances were inappropriate. She viewed Lionel as immature, not because he was 3 years younger, but due to his childish behavior. Despite this, she hoped to help him grow up. In July 2020, Valyriia and Lionel attempted to catch robbers who had stolen money from a store's cash register. The criminals remained at the scene and opened fire, leading to a shootout in which Lionel fatally shot both of them. While this situation could have been avoided, Lionel's response was considered appropriate for apprehending the suspects. Nonetheless, this incident put a strain on the relationship between Valyriia and Lionel. Valyria's last birthday celebration was on May 29, 2021, when she turned 25. The event took place at her mother's house and was attended by many guests, including family, friends, and co-workers. However, Lionel was not invited. Valyriia decided not to invite his, as he had recently tried to pursue her again, and she wanted to avoid any awkwardness. When Valyriia attempted to discuss with him, he only reiterated his feelings for her, which she preferred to keep private from her colleagues. Despite the big turnout, presents, warm wishes, and heartfelt congratulations, Valyriia appeared upset, even as she tried to smile. She had recently argued with her father and they hadn't spoken in days. Valyriia had hoped her father would come to her birthday, but instead, he only sent a brief congratulatory message and didn't even call. Jacqueline, her mother, recognized her daughter's unhappiness and understood the cause of her sorrow. Frustrated with her ex-husband's behavior, she believed he would eventually reach out to Valyriia and they would resolve their differences, as they had in the past. Tragically, Valyriia and her father never had the opportunity to speak again. Just 2 weeks later, on June 13, 2021, Valyriia lost her life while on duty. She was working the night shift, patrolling the streets and checking vehicles as part of a manhunt for a suspect in connection with a crime against a young woman that occurred yesterday on the outskirts of the capital. Authorities were on high alert for a white Kia, suspected to be driven by one of the criminals. The suspect likely had a weapon and may not have been alone in the vehicle. Valyriia was in a patrol car with her partner, Lionel, and they were being driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and decided to chase it without waiting for backup. The officers successfully blocked the suspect's escape. Lionel and Vivano got out of their car with their guns drawn, ordering the suspects to surrender and exit their vehicle with their hands raised. Suddenly, a single gunshot was heard, leaving everyone confused about who had fired and from where. Valyriia, holding her side, collapsed onto the asphalt next to the police car. Reinforcements arrived at that moment, and Valyria's colleagues heard the gunshot and saw she was injured, but they didn't fully understand what had happened or who had shot her. Taking advantage of the chaos, the criminals quickly fled the scene while first aid was being given to the wounded officer. Despite the swift arrival of medics and the efforts of her colleagues to control the bleeding, Valyriia could not be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists worked hard to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital parts, she passed away on the operating table without regaining consciousness. When Valyria's family received the news, her parents, brothers, and sisters quickly went to the hospital. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, had already passed away. Miguel was not only heartbroken but completely shattered, as he never had the chance to talk to and make amends with his dear daughter after their last small argument. He felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and was so distressed by the tragedy that he needed medical help to avoid a heart attack. Valyriia was officially reported to have died while on duty during an operation aimed at capturing dangerous criminals. She was celebrated as a hero who sacrificed her life for the safety and well-being of others. Local media extensively covered the incident, with reporters highlighting her bravery and selflessness. The investigation into her death was conducted by experts from the Homicide and Major Crimes Division, where Valyriia had previously served. They determined that she died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen, inflicted by an assailant in the direction of the suspect's vehicle that she and her colleagues were chasing. The situation initially seemed straightforward, as witnesses supported the narrative, making it appear that the case had been resolved. The only task left was to locate and hold the offenders accountable, who were still at large and possibly fleeing. Shortly after, the suspects were caught, attracting significant public attention. The criminals were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Capon and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was kept confidential due to his age. Both individuals had prior convictions for lesser crimes. The then president of Chile, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement assuring the public that the perpetrators would face justice according to the law. However, nothing felt off. After the autopsy and necessary examinations, Valyria's body was returned to her family, who gave her a respectful burial in one of the city's cemeteries. Hundreds attended the funeral to pay their respects and offer condolences to her family. Jacqueline and Miguel described the entire experience as a nightmare. Among those who carried Valyria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed to grieve more than anyone else. However, other colleagues noted there had recently been some tension between them, to the point that Valyriia hadn't invited Lionel to her birthday party. Shortly after the funeral, court proceedings began for the suspects who had been arrested the day after the incident and were currently in custody. Everyone believes that the person responsible for Valyria's death has been caught, and proving their guilt seems simple, especially when they begin to give confessions. However, it soon became apparent that the investigation had serious flaws from the beginning. Important details were missed, and crucial forensic evidence was minimized. The process was mismanaged, and higher officials tried to hide the identity of the actual person responsible for Valyria's death. About a month and a half after Valyria's death, the case took an unexpected turn. By the end of July, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged involvement in the incident that led to Valyria's death. On August 1st, the parents of Valyriia were summoned to the prosecutor's office in the capital for an important meeting. They believed this meant that new evidence had come to light, and that the detainees would finally face the punishment they deserved. Miguel and Jacqueline were devastated to hear that Valyriia was killed by a bullet fired by a colleague. Prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco personally announced the news, expressing condolences and apologizing on behalf of the entire investigation team. Valyria's parents were in shock. They couldn't grasp how it could have occurred. The fatal shot that killed Valyriia was fired from a gun by one of her colleagues. A ballistics examination conducted that day confirmed this, but the results were inaccurately reported. The bullet taken from the body Valyriia was incorrectly categorized with different characteristics, such as shape, caliber, and weight. Additionally, the bullet had passed through the body rather than being extracted from it. There was a mix-up in the forensic reports regarding the entry and exit wounds. The bullet did not enter through the abdomen and exit through the back as stated. In fact, the shot was fired at her back. Several pages from the autopsy report were missing, and others had been obviously tampered with. Furthermore, the detainees involved in the trial, who supposedly admitted their guilt and were about to be sentenced, began to file complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and intimidation, and that the firearm they had that night was not loaded. Valyria's story takes a sudden turn when she goes from a tragic hero who died on the job to a victim of betrayal, murdered by her own colleagues. In light of these new developments, the main suspects became Felipe Gilardo Era, the officer driving the police car, and Valyria's partner, Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, who was in the back seat. Both were promptly suspended from their duties. On August 5th, it was revealed that the bullet that killed Valyriia came from a service weapon. Later, an examination report showed that only Lionel had gunshot residue on his hands, making him the prime suspect. Interestingly, this information had not been disclosed earlier, as if it had been overlooked entirely. Several reports related to the ballistics examination and the pathologist's findings were mistakenly placed in an archive box, which was not properly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was due to an accident, criminal negligence, or an intentional effort to hide important information. Now, the police officers involved in to capture the criminals that night are themselves regarded as suspects in the murder of Valyriia. They, along with the previously arrested suspects, participated in a reenactment of the incident from that night. Philippe stated that from the driver's seat, he could only see Valyriia, who was next to him in the front passenger seat and was the first to get out of the car. Lionel was sitting in the back and also exited, but the driver couldn't see his actions. Valyriia had taken only a few steps when a shot rang out, she fell, and the suspect's car they were pursuing sped away. Lionel quickly ran to help Valyriia. Lionel mentioned that he and Philippe exited the patrol car almost at the same time, but she had rushed forward as soon as the shot was fired. He firmly maintained that he did not shoot Valyriia, and Philippe must witness and confirm this. He also confirmed that he was the first to reach Valyriia and attempted to apply pressure to her wound. The testimonies from the witnesses varied, but the investigation revealed that Lionel was positioned behind Valyriia at the time of the gunshot, and the bullet's path confirmed his location. Additionally, he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands. New information from previously undisclosed reports and exam results led to potential motives for the crime. Lionel was arrested as the main suspect, while the previously detained young men were released with a non-exit agreement, since there were no charges against them. However, the reason for Lionel's actions is still uncertain. The primary theory was that the incident was a tragic accident. It is believed that Lionel, inexperienced officer, accidentally discharged his weapon while standing behind Valyriia. In a state of panic, he tried to assist her, and when he returned his service weapon that day, he claimed he hadn't fired it. However, the truth soon emerged, and the young man's powerful relatives used their wealth and connections to try to cover up the incident. Because of that, the cleaned reports, missing documents, confusing evidence, and coerced testimonies from the detained individuals contributed. One theory, which Lionel himself partially confirmed, was that he was in love with Valyriia and desperately wanted her attention. Unfortunately, his attempts only annoyed her, and she didn't even invite him to her birthday party, which the whole department attended. The shot in the back was his way of seeking revenge for this rejection. Another theory, suggested by Valyria's relatives, was that Valyriia had uncovered something she shouldn't have, perhaps a corruption scheme or official misconduct. Being an honest and fair person, she would expose the culprit, leading to her being murdered to cover up the evidence. Young Lionel was chosen to carry out this act, with the promise that he would remain above suspicion. After Philippe was taken into custody, suspicions regarding Philippe remained. He was armed with the same type of service weapon, stood behind Valyriia, and had the opportunity to fire the shot. Additionally, Philippe had a history of discipline for the unjustified use of a weapon during a criminal arrest, although no one was hurt in that incident. Because of this, he earned the nickname, the Reckless Shooter. Lionel's defense team quickly adopted this theory, claiming that Philippe accidentally shot Valyriia. Since both Philippe and Lionel carried identical service weapons, it was possible that the guns were mixed up or intentionally swapped. Additionally, Philippe was inconsistent in his testimony, changing it multiple times. He later said he couldn't accurately recall the incident of that night because everything happened so quickly. However, no gunpowder residue was found on his hands, suggesting he was innocent. In response, Lionel claimed that gunpowder got on his hands while he was applying pressure to Valyria's wound, and that Era, who also assisted she, might have washed his hands before the examination. This explanation was not credible, as Valyria's blood stains were still on Philippe's hands, and it is impossible to wash away gunpowder without also removing blood. The trial and verdict have raised concerns about the competence of the investigation team, leaving Valyria's parents feeling desperate in their quest for justice. The new developments in the case led to public outrage and diminished trust in law enforcement. This story garnered attention not just from Chilean media but also from international outlets. As a result, several high-ranking officials were suspended or lost their jobs, including the head of the Homicide Investigation Department. Following a further investigation, Lionel was identified as the sole suspect, with all others cleared and designated as witnesses. In the spring of 2022, he was officially charged and remained in custody until the trial concluded. The hearings for the case began in March of the following year, and based on the evidence and witness testimonies, Lionel's guilt was clearly established. At first, the prosecution charged Lionel with intentionally murdering Valyriia and aimed for the harshest possible sentence. But Lionel maintained that he would never hurt Valyriia because he loved her. However, the bullet that killed her came from his gun. Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales was convicted of manslaughter and received a 12-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. After the verdict was announced, the Vivano family voiced their disappointment, believing the sentence was too light. Meanwhile, Lionel and his legal team quickly filed several appeals. In February 2024, Valyria's family received a shocking update when the Supreme Court unexpectedly reduced the punishment for Lionel to just 540 days in prison, starting from the day he was arrested. This meant he effectively walked out of the courtroom a free man. In response, Valyriia Vivano's family intends to sue the Chilean government, alleging that the judges acted corruptly. In a statement, Valyria's mother expressed her heartbreak, stating that the original 12-year sentence had felt too lenient, but the new decision felt like a mockery. She mentioned that it was as if she had lost her daughter all over again and that she no longer had faith in justice. Furthermore, she emphasized that their family was determined to hold the negligent Chilean government for what had happened. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. In 2014, a particularly disturbing case came to light during a routine traffic stop in Smith County, Mississippi. Initially, police noticed a strong stench coming from the truck. When an officer approached the driver to ask for his papers, the man appeared nervous and disoriented. The officer's concerns grew as he inspected the vehicle, which had a strong odor of decay. The driver was identified as 37-year-old Timothy Jones Jr., and as the investigation continued, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. The case became more disturbing when it was discovered that Timothy had 5 children, but the truck contained only a few clothes and no sign of the children. The truth about Timothy's children was so shocking that it left the police stunned. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser were a divorced couple with 5 children under the age of 9, their names being Abigail, 1, Gabriel, 2, Naughton, 6, Elias, 7, Mara, 8. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. The two met as teenagers and eventually married when they were young. Timothy attended school in Mississippi, while Amber focused on raising the children and taking care of the family. However, Timothy's past was full of challenges. As a child, he witnessed his mother's mental health decline due to schizophrenia. She left home to work in intimate services, leading Timothy to believe that she had abandoned him. His father then moved him in with his grandmother at a young age. Timothy's early years showed promise despite his challenging childhood. He demonstrated a natural aptitude for mathematics, an ability to solve problems easily, and the ability to take computers apart and reassemble them to improve their performance. However, things changed as Timothy entered his teens. At age 10, he began using drugs and drinking excessively. At age 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident that affected the frontal lobe. the area of the brain that controls impulses and is associated with personality disorder. After the accident, he felt very jealous of those around his father. Over time, Timothy believed that his father did not love him and feared that he would be abandoned. Timothy struggled with emotional immaturity, despite his growing intelligence. This limited his ability to understand and connect with others, and impaired his decision-making skills. Although Timothy was accepted into the U.S. Navy SEALs program in high school because of his intelligence, his lack of athletic experience and lack of discipline hindered his progress. He only attended training for a few weeks, often crying out of frustration as he struggled to keep up with the rigorous demands. This led to depression and subsequent drug tests that revealed he was abusing drugs, leading to his expulsion. In 2000, Timothy began associating with people who were involved in illegal activities. Police caught him with illegal substances and discovered that he had used his father's name to write counterfeit checks. As a result, the police told Timothy's father that he had to report his son to the police or face arrest. In 2001, Timothy was sent to a work camp in an Illinois state prison for a year. Upon his release, he appeared to have changed, finding religion to be the guiding force in his life. He had memorized several key sections of religious texts and wished to live strictly according to them. Timothy met his wife, Amber, while working at a theme park in Chicago. In 2004, he invited her to his Pentecostal church. Within weeks, they decided to get married. At the time, Amber was 19 and Timothy was 22. As they settled into married life, Amber realized that the church had very strict rules for women, including not being allowed to cut their hair, dress, wear makeup, or wear jewelry. Timothy, who was very devoted to the church, also believed in the traditional role of women as submissive partners and expected them to focus on having children, following the biblical command to be fruitful and multiply. The couple soon had 3 children: Mara, Elias, and Naughton, each born a year apart. After moving to Mississippi, Timothy attended State University, where he earned a degree in computer science and engineering with highest honors. Things seemed to be going well for him. He landed a job as a computer chip maker at Intel, which Amber saw as her ticket to a better life. After living in student housing in Mississippi, she dreamed of raising 3 children in a larger home and even considered hiring a nanny. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Timothy chose to buy an old trailer off a dirt road in Red Bank because he dreamed of living on a farm. He bought animals to raise, and Amber stayed home with the children and animals in this isolated area. By 2012, the family had 2 more children, Gabriel and Abigail. He wanted Amber to homeschool the children, even though she only had a high school education. Amber felt increasingly isolated without her family and Timothy's family in Mississippi. She felt inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with a neighbor, causing their marriage to deteriorate. They began to consider divorce. In an effort to gain full custody of the children, Timothy told his divorce attorney that he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, without a lawyer and unsure of what to do, felt she had no choice but to agree to leave the children with their father, as she was unemployed and uneducated, and felt she had nothing to offer them. Timothy's marriage ended and his life spiraled out of control. He began using drugs and alcohol again, which worsened his mental health. Unable to balance work and family, he hired a babysitting service. The first 2 nannies said that Timothy's house was very clean and he seemed very devoted to his children. He then changed his services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter. The nanny quickly became his lover. As their relationship deepened, Timothy attempted to control Crystal by forcing her to follow church customs, including wearing long dresses and growing her hair long. He also insisted that she submit to him, treating him as her superior. Crystal refused to comply with Timothy's demands, which quickly caused their relationship to deteriorate. Crystal quit her job after witnessing him beating her young daughter and his extremely harsh treatment of his own children. Timothy believed that punishing children was necessary for their safety and often made them stand on their toes for hours as a form of discipline. After Crystal left, Timothy hired a new nanny, who quickly noticed major changes in Timothy's behavior and home environment. The once clean house was now littered with trash, dirty clothes, and cockroaches. Over time, Timothy's behavior became increasingly aggressive, leading to daily punishment of the children. He also severely restricted their diet to oatmeal throughout the day and only fed them one meal a day. A turning point came in August 2014 when a nanny contacted South Carolina Social Services to report severe abuse and neglect in the home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children endured. The abuse was so severe that teachers at the elementary school where the older children attended had reported it to the family months earlier. The school had previously required Timothy to sign a written promise that he would never abuse or hit his children again, as they often came to school with bruises. When asked about the injuries, the children said their father would grab them by the neck and slam them against the wall. On Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up the 3 older children from elementary school, followed by the 2 younger children from a babysitter. That evening, around 7 p.m., Timothy became angry over some broken outlets in their mobile home. He accused his 6-year-old son, Naughton, of breaking the outlets and interrogated him. When Naughton claimed he didn't know anything, Timothy forced the boy to do push-ups and squats, repeating the sequence several times. Each time Naughton slowed down, Timothy whipped the boy with a belt. Throughout the punishment, Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, attempted to call and talk to her children. Calls were made at 7 o'clock, 7:02, 7:05, and 7:09, until 7:10 Timothy finally answered. During the conversation, Nada recounted her punishment, claiming that the broken outlet was an accident. This revelation further angered Timothy, fueling his rage. Timothy ended Amber's call and began mistreating Naughton for hours. The boy became extremely exhausted and dehydrated, and repeatedly begged for the ordeal to end. Eventually, the boy collapsed from his ordeal, ending the abuse. Despite Naughton's critical condition, Timothy left the boy alone in bed without providing him with any water or medical assistance. Phone records show that Amber attempted to contact Timothy 8 more times after he ended the call. That night, at approximately 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter, Mara, to a local convenience store to buy cigarettes. After returning home, he attacked Mara, strangling her. Timothy then went to his 7-year-old son, Elias, and did the same. He then took off his belt and went to Gabriel, 2, and Abigail, 1. He wrapped the belt around their necks and pulled until they stopped breathing. Seeing that none of the children were moving, he took their sheets and blankets, wrapped them individually, and placed them in the back seat of the car. On Friday, August 29th, Timothy's father called him at approximately 7:43 a.m., but no one answered. However, when the nanny called at 9:36 a.m., Timothy answered on the second call. During the conversation, the nanny asked about taking the younger children to daycare, and Timothy responded that he would take care of it, saying that they were currently out and would be back on Tuesday. That morning, he drove from place to place. From noon to 2 p.m., he searched online for out-of-state drugs. By 1:27 a.m., Timothy was near Alabama, and his grandmother called him several times, but he did not respond and continued to ignore her messages throughout the day. A total of 23 calls. In the late afternoon, between 3 o'clock and 5 p.m., Timothy continued to search online for tobacco stores in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campgrounds in South Carolina. That evening, at 8:04 p.m., Timothy's phone location was tracked to Georgia. The following day, on August 30th, his grandmother continued to attempt to contact him, asking why he had not returned her calls. Timothy's phone location was later tracked to Red Bank, New Jersey. On August 31st, Timothy conducted several internet searches at 10:08 a.m., looking for information about camping stores, RV parks in South Carolina, landfills in both the state and Lexington County, and animal care services. He also searched for 2 specific songs. That evening at 4:54 p.m., the nanny sent Timothy a text message reminding him to bring diapers for Gabriel and Abigail the following Tuesday. About an hour later, Timothy responded to her text message. He informed her that he was leaving South Carolina with the children to start a new life. He also asked the nanny to clean out the trailer and offered to take any belongings she wanted that he left behind. That evening, at 7 p.m., Timothy's ex-wife Amber attempted to contact him by phone, but he did not return her calls. On September 1st, he drove from place to place. The next morning, at 10:35 a.m., he conducted a series of internet searches, including queries about a body in a dumpster, methods for making muriatic acid, camping sites near Colombia, countries without extradition laws, and advice on fleeing when faced with legal problems. Throughout the day, he exchanged text messages with the nanny, who informed him that she had cleaned the trailer. He also received a text message from his employer at Intel, asking when he could come to work. Additionally, Amber attempted to contact him by phone at approximately 6 p.m., but he chose not to respond. On the morning of September 3rd, a coworker attempted to contact Timothy by phone, but he did not answer. Later that day, surveillance footage showed Timothy at a popular store, where he purchased several items, including a saw, muriatic acid, trash bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and safety glasses. The next day, September 4th, Timothy went to a bank at 6:33 a.m. and deposited a check for $3,518. On September 5th, his location was discovered in Louisville, Georgia, although his phone was only activated briefly that day. The bodies had been in the back seat of his car since August 29th, when Timothy dumped his children's decomposing bodies in a rural area of Alabama at 9:14 a.m. on September 6th. He placed them in black plastic trash bags and left them in a clearing in the woods. Later that day, at 7 p.m., Timothy was stopped at a traffic stop in Smith County, Mississippi. An officer approached the vehicle and smelled a foul odor. The carpet inside the vehicle appeared to have been recently cleaned with bleach. The sheriff stopped Timothy and asked him to show his identification and vehicle registration. When asked, the sheriff noticed that Timothy appeared to be under the influence of something. After testing Timothy, the sheriff discovered that he had an outstanding warrant in South Carolina related to child welfare. When asked about the whereabouts of his children, Timothy initially denied having any children. However, he later claimed to have 3 children living in South Carolina. The officers then asked Timothy to provide them with the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety. After the calls, officers immediately arrested Timothy. Once in the patrol car, Timothy became distressed and began talking to officers about his actions with his children. Timothy explained that one of his sons had been playing with an electrical outlet, and in a fit of anger and frustration, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him. Timothy said he was violent with his other children. He beat one of his sons until the child lost consciousness. When his older daughter witnessed what was happening and intervened, Timothy grabbed her and choked her until she turned purple. He gave conflicting explanations for his actions to police, with Timothy saying that when he saw his son playing with an electrical outlet, he believed the boy was trying to harm him, which led him to kill his son. When asked about his motive, Timothy explained that he killed his children because he heard voices that made him believe they were plotting against him. He also mistakenly believed that death would bring them more happiness in the afterlife. Timothy initially claimed that his son Nathan's punishment had gotten out of hand, leading to his death after overexertion. Timothy then decided to end the lives of his remaining children. Police questioned why Timothy did not call 911 if it was indeed an accident. Instead, he tried to escape and dump his children. That same day, Timothy led police to the location where the bodies were hidden, and on September 10th, the children's remains were found. During a search of Timothy's car, several personal items were discovered, including family photos, children's clothing, artwork they had created, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy's college diploma, and his passport. These items were turned over to South Carolina police on September 11th. Among the items seized was a to-do list written by Timothy. The list contained disturbing tasks such as disposing of the body, grinding bones into powder or smaller pieces, and burning the body. It also included items necessary for these tasks, such as camping supplies, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Timothy was arrested on September 13, 2014, and was held in a high-security cell separate from other inmates. While in custody, he underwent multiple evaluations by mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. There are differing opinions among experts who have assessed Timothy's mental state. Some believe he suffered from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or a personality disorder. According to them, his mental condition at the time of the crime may have been worsened by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury when he was 15, which may have led to an underlying mental disorder. These theories were shared with the jury at trial. Other experts, on the other hand, argued that Timothy understood his actions. They pointed out that his efforts to conceal evidence, including from his children, showed that he knew what he was doing was morally and legally wrong. The investigation found that Timothy's internet search history showed that he knew what he was doing was wrong. However, the prosecution offered a different motive, claiming that Timothy was under immense stress due to the breakdown of his marriage and the challenges of caring for his 5 young children. According to Timothy's testimony, the alleged trigger for his actions was his wife's affair with a neighbor who later became her husband. However, his wife disputed this claim in her testimony, saying that her relationship with the neighbor began after her divorce. The trial was held in late May 2019, and included weeks of testimony and evidence against Timothy. The crime is considered one of the most serious in South Carolina history. Tragically, the children's last words to their father were filled with love. When police searched the house after the crime, they found Naughton's favorite toy from Toy Story broken into pieces. Naughton appears to have been the most severely punished, but all the testimonies agree on one thing: the children loved their father. On June 13, 2019, after just 2 hours of deliberation, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to death. As a result, he is currently being held in solitary confinement at a correctional facility. This tragic case ultimately resulted in the loss of innocent young lives, unfortunately due to the marital problems of the parents. Both parents made serious mistakes that could not be undone. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Landry. Lucy Landry was born in 1971 in Ronda, England, to Roger and Andrea Landry. She has a younger sister named Anna. Lucy had a happy childhood. Because she and her sister had similar interests, they were always very close. During primary school, Lucy's outgoing and friendly personality made her a favorite of her teachers and classmates. She was a beautiful girl, and at school she became one of the most popular girls. Lucy and Anna shared a love of ponies, and their father surprised them by enrolling them in the local equestrian club. This taught them discipline and showed off their talents. They later represented the club in many events and competitions. By the time Lucy started secondary school, she had become an excellent equestrian. However, her passion was not limited to the track. She also began studying the flute and piano, spending many hours practicing to master both instruments. Her hard work soon paid off. And within a year she had a comprehensive understanding of classical music, and she was accepted into the youth orchestra and joined the school choir. As often happens in adolescence, a healthy romantic interest entered her life, and Lucy became very close to Gareth Jenkins. However, she kept her feelings a secret. After completing her secondary education in 1989, Lucy decided to pursue a career in music. To this end, she enrolled in a BA degree at the University of Warwick. Her goal was to become a music teacher and dedicate herself to music education. However, things did not go as planned. Although she was passionate about music, she did not like the direction of the degree program. She therefore decided to change her plans and study urban planning. During this time, Lucy met Gra McAllister, and they soon discovered that their outlook on life was very similar. They shared a love for art and common interests. Their relationship progressed and they began to plan for the future. Lucy decided to introduce him to her parents. Roger and Andrea were delighted with the meeting, as they believed he was the ideal partner for their daughter. Her parents were so delighted that they decided to buy Lucy a house in Coventry, a city in northwest London. After moving to a new home, Lucy invited Gra to live with her and they continued to go to school. In 1995, they had their first child, named James. Lucy decided to drop out of college to focus on raising the child. Meanwhile, Gra continued her college studies and took a night shift job at the post office to cover her living expenses. For many months, she had to stay home alone to take care of the child and had to be away from Gra for many hours. She began to feel bored. Then, she found no better solution than exploring chat rooms on the internet to distract herself, looking for ways to meet new people. One night, while Lucy was participating in online conversations in many chat rooms, she met Harold Landry. Harold, a 53-year-old American from Louisiana, was born into a very poor family. And he knew that hard work was the only way to escape poverty. His opportunity came when he realized that in the oil industry, the key was not to own an oil well but to provide essential infrastructure for the owners of such. He founded his own company, specializing in providing infrastructure for oil field owners. Harold amassed a huge fortune by designing and manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States, eventually becoming a billionaire. In his personal life, Harold was married and divorced twice, and his children from previous relationships were not made public. A significant event took place in 1992 when Harold was still single. He met a married woman 20 years his junior. Harold pursued and courted her and she eventually succumbed to his advances. On February 6, 1994, Harold took her out to New Orleans, hiring a babysitter to look after her children. After the evening ended, Harold accompanied his mistress to her home and offered to take the babysitter to her home. Outside the residence, Chris, the betrayed husband, secretly watched his wife's actions. After dropping his mistress off at home, Harold, saying goodbye, left. The girl's husband Chris followed Harold's car, which Harold noticed was tailing him. Acting on instinct, Harold opened the glove compartment and pulled out a gun that he had kept inside. When both cars stopped at a red light, the situation became tense. According to the babysitter, Harold pointed the pistol at Chris and fired. The bullet severed an artery in Chris's neck and damaged a nerve that connected to his vocal cords. Chris collapsed on the sidewalk with a wound to his neck. Fortunately, there was a hospital right in front of them, allowing him to receive immediate first aid, and doctors saved his life. Harold was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His trial took place in 1997. In his opening statement, the defense attorney told the jury that Chris was the victim of a tragic and terrible incident. As for his client, he said he had acted out of fear and self-defense. The defense's clever strategy led the jury, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, to find Harold guilty of the lesser charge of aggravated assault. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. After an appeal, Harold was given probation. In exchange, he had to pay a $500 fine and perform community service. Although he wanted to be completely exonerated, he thanked his attorney, Pat, for her hard work. They have since become good friends. Soon after, Harold and Chris agreed to an undisclosed settlement amount. By the time Harold began chatting with Lucy, he was already living in Covington and still wealthy enough to not have to work. He was also honest about his profession and everything about his past life, including his love life and run-ins with the law. Surprisingly, these revelations only made Lucy more attracted to him. As they continued to chat online, Harold painted a picture of a lavish lifestyle that Lucy found hard to resist. His determination and charm eventually paid off when Lucy ended her relationship with GRA. In the early 2000s, Harold traveled to England to meet Lucy, and she took the opportunity to introduce him to her parents as her boyfriend. Although they were surprised by the significant age gap between the two, they respected their daughter's choice and did not express any objection to the relationship. Harold felt grateful and pleased to be sharing his life with Lucy, and he did everything he could to surprise her with lavish gifts and anything else she wanted. By this point, he had fallen in love with her and was thinking about proposing to her. However, he wanted the proposal to be special and was waiting for the perfect time and setting. To achieve his goal, Harold organized a trip to his favorite destination, Mexico, with Lucy, her son, James, and GRA. The location was also convenient because his friend Pat, who used to be his lawyer, had an apartment nearby. Before the trip, Harold bought a diamond ring and excitedly shared his plans with Pat. However, Pat expressed some misgivings about Lucy. During their time in Mexico, Pat noticed that Lucy spent a lot of time with GRA, which he found unusual. He seemed completely oblivious to this and eventually went ahead with the proposal. Lucy happily accepted the proposal and in mid-2003. Soon after, Harold surprised her by buying a multi-million-dollar property in a posh Worcestershire neighborhood. Their marriage was peaceful. They had wonderful neighbors such as Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, who later became lovely friends. Soon after, the newlyweds had their first daughter, whom they named Harriet. Lucy and Harold were both delighted to welcome their little girl, and from then on, he devoted his heart and soul to her. Equally important and affectionate was the relationship he maintained with James, whom he treated as his own son. But over time, their initial happiness began to fade. Harold began to make more demands on Lucy, which made her increasingly annoyed. He expected her to always conform to his preferences and do what he asked, taking on a submissive role. Lucy, however, had different expectations, and this caused tension in their relationship. Eventually, Lucy became outspoken and unafraid to express her thoughts, and in this move, her husband was unwilling to give in. James witnessed the breakdown of his mother and stepfather's relationship. The neighbors were disturbed by the constant arguments that lasted for hours. They also knew that Lucy and Harold had an alcohol problem, which caused their loud arguments and complaints. Whenever the couple had a particularly intense argument, resulting in them not speaking to each other for a while, the neighbors felt a sense of relief and peace. In mid-2009, Lucy used social media to reconnect with Gareth, an old friend from high school whom she had not spoken to in years. Lucy's husband, Harold, would often go to bed while Lucy stayed up to chat online. Harold began to realize that Lucy was using social media to find someone new, just as she had found him before. But instead of confronting her, he decided to give her some space, and he traveled to Mexico and stayed there for a while. Meanwhile, Lucy invites Gareth to live with her. In the fall of 2009, her husband Harold returns to England in the hope of mending their marriage. However, as soon as he moves in, Lucy asks for a divorce. Initially, he is devastated. Then, after a few weeks, Harold begins a relationship. He meets this new woman online. She lives nearby and goes by the name Rachel. As Lucy and Harold pursue their new relationship, their divorce negotiations begin, but new conflicts arise. One major point of disagreement is the house. Lucy wants to keep it to ensure stability for their children, while Harold is determined to sell it. He gives Lucy money to buy a smaller apartment and removes her from his will. When Lucy discovers this, her hatred for him drives her to share everything about Harold's past with their son James, leaving nothing out. Amid the tension, Gareth invited Lucy to come to Wales with him for a few days. After returning home, Lucy no longer tried to hide her phone conversations from her new love. Meanwhile, Lucy and Harold were both drinking heavily, and the arguments escalated, leaving the children exposed to a violent and unbearable atmosphere. On Monday, February 1, 2010, Harold had been drinking all day. When a package arrived for Stephen, Harold mistakenly received it. That evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen returned home from work to find a notification that his package had been delivered to the Landry's home. Seeing the lights on, Stephen went to their house to collect the package. Harold invited him in and offered him a drink. After a brief conversation with Lucy, Stephen realized that Harold was drunk. He took his package, apologized, and left. The couple then argued about buying furniture for their upcoming move. The disagreement was trivial, but it escalated into a fight. During the argument, Harold hit Lucy across the cheek with a kitchen utensil. James, who had learned to deal with their arguments over the years, intervened and saw that his mother was injured. He quickly called the police and made it his priority to get his sister to safety. Lucy and the children fled the house to seek help after the incident. Lucy ran to Stephen's house. However, Harold caught up with her and stabbed her several times with a knife before leaving her under a bush in the garden. Alerted by Lucy's screams, Stephen ran outside and found her after only a few steps. Initially, he thought she had passed out, but he soon realized the severity of her injuries. After receiving an emergency call, the police arrived at the scene. They called an ambulance and searched the surrounding area for the culprit. However, they only found the children hiding terrified in the backyard in the dark. An ambulance then took Lucy to the hospital. Unfortunately, her heart had stopped. Harold went to his new girlfriend Rachel's house, revealing that something terrible had happened, but he did not explain further. He gave her $40,000 in bank money, some cash, his car keys, and some blank checks with his signature on them. He then returned home. Several police patrols searched for him, and he was eventually found walking along the road and arrested. Her parents Roger and Andrea were devastated after hearing the news. In a statement released by the police, her parents asked for respect while they grieved for the loss of their daughter. They declined to speak to the media at this time. Instead, they focused on caring for their grandchildren. A post-mortem examination later confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. On February 5, 2010, Harold was brought to trial and charged with murder, based on evidence and witness testimony from James. The trial began in early February 2011, with Judge David Fawson presiding and Harold's attorney Andy Childs defending. During the trial, Harold's defense team argued that he was driven to action by his wife Lucy's intense anger, which left him feeling provoked and left with no other choice. Harold took the stand, tearfully expressing his love for Lucy and remorse for his actions. He then followed his attorney's strategy, claiming that he was guilty of involuntary manslaughter because Lucy had pushed him to the limit. The prosecution presented a highly detailed animation of the many injuries the victim suffered. This presentation shocked those in the courtroom. On February 24, 2011, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Harold Landry guilty of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Landry. Harold was 64 years old at the time of the murder. The following day, the judge delivered a scathing statement when sentencing Harold. He described the attack as horrific and unforgivable, dismissing Harold's claims that Lucy may have provoked him. The judge viewed these claims as a desperate attempt by Harold to defend himself. As a result, Harold was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years before he could be considered for parole. This meant that he would have to be over 80 before he was eligible for parole. Lucy's family and friends expressed their gratitude not only for the case being resolved, but also for the judge's comments.